Your sister and her family get the guest room. You can sleep on the floor. Mom tossed two dusty sleeping bags at my feet. My brother-in-law laughed from the sofa, swirling an expensive glass of wine, telling me I should have just booked a hotel if I wanted a real bed. I looked down at my 8-year-old daughter, who was shivering in the drafty hallway. I did not scream. I did not cry. I simply looked at my child and whispered for her to pack her things. We walked out into the freezing snow at midnight. 2 days later, my mother discovered exactly what I quietly canceled, leaving me 80 missed calls. My name is Alyssa, and I am 34 years old. For my entire life, I have been the designated scapegoat of my family. I am the one who was expected to absorb the financial burdens, swallow my pride, and smile through the disrespect to keep the peace. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to walk away from toxic relatives who mistook your generosity for weakness. The Thanksgiving night that changed my life began with a grueling 6-hour drive through a brutal snowstorm. The roads from New York to my mother Patricia's affluent suburban home were slick with black ice. In the back seat of my car, my 8-year-old daughter Mia slept soundly, clutching her favorite stuffed bear. I kept my hands gripped tightly on the steering wheel, fighting exhaustion driven solely by the promise of a warm holiday weekend with my family. I was a single mother, and despite my demanding career as the vice president of global partnerships for an international luxury resort group, I always made an effort to show up for family traditions. When I finally pulled into the snow-covered driveway, I breathed a sigh of relief. The large colonial house was beautifully lit, looking like a picture-perfect holiday card. I unbuckled a groggy Mia, grabbed our duffel bags, and trudged up the icy front steps. I anticipated a warm fire-hot cider and the welcoming embrace of my mother. Instead, when Patricia opened the door, she did not even offer a hug. She stood there in her pristine white cashmere sweater, blocking the entryway. "Take your boots off on the porch, Alyssa," she demanded immediately. "You are going to track slush onto the hardwood." I complied, shivering, as the freezing wind whipped around us. I guided Mia inside, expecting my mother to lead us to the upstairs guest room we usually shared. But Patricia did not move toward the stairs. Instead, she reached into the hall closet and pulled out two rolled-up mildew-scented sleeping bags. She dropped them unceremoniously at my feet. "Brittany and Jamal are using the main guest suite," Patricia announced, her tone daring me to argue. "And before you ask, no, you cannot use the downstairs study. Brittany set up her recording equipment in there. You and Mia will have to take the basement." I stared at the sleeping bags on the floor, my brain struggling to process her words after the exhausting drive. The basement was unfinished, poorly insulated, and completely freezing in the dead of winter. "Mom, it is 20 degrees outside," I said, keeping my voice low so I would not frighten Mia. "You expect an 8-year-old child to sleep on a concrete floor in the basement?" We agreed weeks ago that Mia and I would have the guest room. "Plans change," Patricia snapped, crossing her arms. "Brittany's toy poodle needs space so it does not get stressed out by the holiday commotion. The dog needs the extra square footage to run around. You are an adult, Alyssa. You can manage a few nights in the basement. Do not be so selfish and ruin Thanksgiving for everyone." I looked past my mother into the warm, brightly lit living room. My younger sister, Brittany, the undisputed golden child of the family, was sitting by the roaring fireplace. At 30, Brittany fancied herself a high society lifestyle influencer, though her actual income was practically non-existent. She spent her days unboxing designer items she could not afford and complaining about how hard her life was. Sitting next to her was her husband, Jamal. Jamal was a 32-year-old African-American man who confidently introduced himself as a cryptocurrency entrepreneur and financial visionary. In reality, Jamal was an arrogant freeloader who had not held a steady job in 4 years. He was currently draped over the expensive leather sofa, wearing flashy designer clothes that screamed new money, swirling a glass of my mother's best Cabernet. Jamal noticed me standing in the chilly entryway and let out a loud, mocking laugh. "Economy tough, sis. Jamal called out, his voice dripping with condescension. If you wanted luxury, you should have just booked a five-star hotel. But I guess not everyone has the portfolio for that kind of lifestyle. Just layer up down there. Brittany giggled, petting her perfectly groomed poodle. Jamal is right, Alyssa. You should really learn how to budget better. Maybe then you would not have to rely on Mom for free housing during the holidays. The absolute audacity of their words hit me like a physical blow. The irony was suffocating. I did not rely on my mother for free housing. For the past 5 years, I had been the one quietly paying the entire mortgage on this very house. When my father passed away, he left behind a mountain of secret debt, and Patricia was days away from foreclosure. I stepped in quietly, covering the monthly payments to save her pride. Patricia told everyone at her exclusive country club that the house was paid off thanks to Jamal's brilliant investment advice. She allowed Jamal to parade around like the man of the house, taking credit for the very roof over his head, a roof that my hard-earned corporate salary provided. Jamal was currently wearing a $5,000 watch and drinking a $200 bottle of wine, entirely funded by a black credit card that Patricia claimed was a family emergency fund. That black card was linked directly to my personal bank account. I looked down at Mia. She was rubbing her tired eyes, her small shoulders shivering in the drafty hallway. She looked from the dirty sleeping bags to her grandmother, confusion and sadness washing over her sweet face. "Why doesn't Grandma want us in the warm room?" Mia whispered, her voice trembling. In that exact moment, a profound icy clarity washed over me. For years I had swallowed my pride. I had paid the bills, ignored the insults, and allowed them to treat me like a second-class citizen just to maintain the illusion of a family. I had let them gaslight me into believing that being the bigger person meant accepting abuse. But looking at my daughter, realizing that they were perfectly willing to let a child freeze on a concrete floor so a dog could have a luxury suite, the illusion shattered. I would not teach my daughter to beg for love from people who despised us. I did not scream. I did not argue. I did not demand recognition for the mortgage I paid or the credit card they abused. I simply reached down, picked up the mildewed sleeping bags, and tossed them directly back into the hall closet. "Put your coat back on, Mia," I said gently, taking her small hand in mine. "We are leaving." Patricia's eyes widened in shock. She stepped forward, her face flushing with sudden anger. "You cannot just leave. It is midnight in a snowstorm. Do not be so dramatic, Alyssa." "Watch me," I replied, my voice devoid of any emotion. I turned my back on them, guided my daughter out the front door, and walked out into the freezing snow, leaving my mother speechless in the doorway. As I secured Mia in her car seat and started the engine, I knew this was not just a departure. It was an eviction. They wanted to treat me like an outsider in the house I paid for. Now they were going to find out exactly what happens when the outsider cuts the funding. Patricia stepped directly into my path as I turned toward the heavy oak door. Her face, usually so carefully arranged for her country club friends, twisted into an ugly mask of pure indignation. She threw her arms out, physically blocking the exit. "You are being incredibly selfish right now, Alyssa." Patricia hissed, her voice sharp enough to cut through the freezing draft pouring in from the porch. "You are ruining Thanksgiving for everyone. You expect me to just let you walk out of here and embarrass me in front of Jamal? You are acting like a spoiled child over a simple sleeping arrangement. You are not walking out that door." From the living room, I could hear Jamal laughing, the ice clinking in his expensive wine glass. "Let her go," Patty Jamal called out, his tone dripping with lazy arrogance. "If she wants to throw a tantrum and freeze in her car because she thinks she is too good for the basement, let her. She will come crawling back when she realizes she has nowhere else to go." Brittany chimed in right on cue. "Honestly, Alyssa, you are so toxic. We are just trying to have a peaceful holiday." I did not raise my voice. I did not engage in their pathetic theatrical performance. I simply looked my mother dead in the eyes, pulled Mia securely against my hip, and kept walking. Patricia had to step aside or be knocked over. She chose to step aside, gasping in offended shock as I pulled the heavy front door open. "You walk out now and you can forget about coming back for Christmas." Patricia yelled into the freezing wind as we stepped off the porch. I pulled the door shut behind us, cutting off her voice entirely. The silence of the snowstorm was an instant relief. I buckled Mia into her car seat, my hands completely steady. I started the engine, blasting the heat to chase the bitter cold from the cabin. As I pulled out of the driveway, leaving the picturesque colonial house behind in a swirl of white snow, the silence in the car grew heavy. I glanced in the rearview mirror. Mia was clutching her teddy bear, her small face illuminated by the passing streetlights. Mommy, Mia asked, her voice trembling slightly. Why does Grandma not love us? Why does she always treat you so bad? The question struck me right in the chest, sharp and agonizing. For years, I had convinced myself that keeping the peace was the best thing for my daughter. I thought I was shielding her from family drama by taking the high road, by smiling through the disrespect, by allowing myself to be the designated punching bag. But Mia was incredibly observant. She saw exactly what was happening. She saw her mother being degraded, and she internalized it. By accepting their abuse, I was teaching my own daughter that we deserve to be treated like garbage. I swallowed the heavy lump of grief in my throat. I reached back and gently squeezed her knee. Grandma has a broken heart, baby, I said, keeping my voice calm and reassuring. But that is her problem to fix, not ours. And I promise you nobody is ever going to treat us like that again. Not tonight, not ever. Mia nodded, curling up under her blanket, and within minutes the gentle hum of the heater lulled her to sleep. With my daughter resting safely, the adrenaline faded, replaced by a cold, calculating clarity. I activated the Bluetooth interface on my dashboard and called the priority concierge line for my company. Working as the vice president of global partnerships for an elite luxury hospitality group had its distinct privileges. Within 3 minutes, my concierge had secured the presidential suite at a 5-star hotel in downtown Manhattan. I charged the $3,000 per night rate to my personal account without blinking. Jamal was completely wrong. I did have the portfolio for luxury. I was the one who practically invented the standard for it. As I drove through the snow-covered highway, my mind replayed the sheer audacity of my mother and sister. They treated me like a financial parasite while literally living inside an illusion I paid for. I glanced at the banking app notification glowing on my dashboard display. The automatic transfer for Patricia's $5,000 monthly mortgage payment was scheduled to clear in 3 days. 5 entire years. When my father passed away, he left behind a labyrinth of debt and a final foreclosure notice. Patricia had been sobbing, terrified of losing her social standing at the country club. I had stepped in immediately using my corporate salary and strict financial discipline to bail her out. I quietly assumed the mortgage. I never asked for a thank you. I never demanded recognition. But Patricia could not handle the truth that her least favorite daughter was her savior, so she fabricated a massive lie. She told her wealthy friends, her neighbors, and our entire extended family that the house was paid off thanks to Jamal. She claimed Jamal was a cryptocurrency genius who had generated massive wealth and generously rescued the family estate. Jamal, a man who had not held a W-2 job since his 20s, happily played the part. He paraded around my property, bragging about his fictional investment portfolio, wearing luxury watches, and driving a brand new Range Rover that I had financed for the family. He treated me like a struggling, bitter single mother while literally existing on the charity of my bank account. And Patricia allowed it. She encouraged it. She gave them the master suite while handing my child a dirty sleeping bag for a concrete floor. I pulled up to the glittering entrance of the luxury hotel. The valet immediately rushed out to open my door, welcoming me by name. A bellhop carefully unloaded our bags, and a manager personally escorted Mia and me to the top floor. The presidential suite was a sanctuary of warmth featuring panoramic views of the snowy city, a roaring marble fireplace, and a bed so massive and soft that Mia barely stirred as I tucked her under the Egyptian cotton sheets. I walked into the adjoining private study and sat down at the heavy oak desk. The silence of the suite was broken only by the relentless aggressive buzzing of my phone. I pulled the device from my coat pocket. 80 missed notifications. The family group chat was exploding. Brittany had sent 10 messages calling me a dramatic psycho who hated seeing other people happy. Jamal had sent voice memos laughing about how I was probably freezing in a cheap motel. Patricia had left a blistering paragraph demanding I return immediately and apologized to Jamal for my disrespectful exit, finishing with a threat that I would not receive a single dime of family inheritance if I did not fix my attitude. I did not reply to a single message. I did not justify my departure. I simply set the phone face down on the desk. I unzipped my laptop bag and pulled out my computer. The screen illuminated the dark room, casting a pale glow across my face. I opened my secure browser and navigated directly to my central credit card management portal. I typed in my credentials, bypassed the security prompts, and accessed the master control dashboard. The time for keeping the peace was officially over. The screen of my phone lit up the darkened study of the presidential suite, vibrating relentlessly against the polished oak desk. I picked it up, watching the notifications cascade down the screen from our group chat, which my mother had unironically named Family First. I unlocked the device and scrolled through the barrage of messages. They were a masterclass in gaslighting, perfectly designed to provoke a reaction. My family thrived on my defensive responses. They wanted me to argue, to scream, to justify myself, so they could easily dismiss me as the unstable, bitter single mother they desperately needed me to be. Jamal had sent the first message. "Feel bad for you, sis. Single mom life is clearly too much pressure. It makes you mentally unstable. Walking out into a blizzard over a dog, getting the guest room. Get help. You are embarrassing yourself." Brittany immediately followed up. "Honestly, you completely ruined Thanksgiving. Mia was probably crying because you dragged her out into the freezing cold like a total psycho. Do not expect an apology from us. You need to learn how to adapt." Then came Patricia. The matriarch had to have the final word. "If you think this dramatic little stunt will make me beg you to come back, you are dead wrong, Alyssa. I am calling my lawyer on Monday morning. Do not expect a single dime of inheritance from my estate. You are officially cut off." I read the word inheritance and actually let out a quiet, genuine laugh. It was the most absurd threat she could have possibly made. Patricia did not have an estate. She had a mountain of hidden debt, a maxed-out line of credit, and a mortgage that I had been paying for 5 solid years. She was threatening to cut me out of an inheritance that was entirely funded by my own bank account. Normally, I would have spent an hour drafting a long, emotionally exhausting paragraph. I would have outlined how much money I contributed, how disrespectful they were, and how deeply they had hurt me. But tonight, I was done explaining my worth to people who were committed to misunderstanding me. I did not type a single word. I simply long pressed Patricia's ridiculous threat and tapped the thumbs up emoji. I did the exact same thing to Jamal's message about me being unstable. A simple silent acknowledgement that I had seen their words. I placed the phone face down on the desk, cutting off their digital noise. I turned my attention to the glowing screen of my laptop. I was logged into the internal executive portal for my luxury resort corporation. As the vice president of global partnerships, I had access to the highest tier of our booking systems, a system that managed some of the most exclusive and expensive properties in the world. I navigated past the general dashboard and clicked on my personal reservations tab. There it was, the absolute crowning jewel of Patricia's social calendar. Her grand, highly publicized 40th anniversary vow renewal. For the past 6 months, Patricia had talked about nothing else. She had boasted to every single member of her elite country club about the lavish, no-expense-spared winter wonderland vacation awaiting them. 50 of her most wealthy, judgmental friends were invited. They were all scheduled to fly out to Aspen next week for a 7-day retreat. Patricia had proudly told everyone who would listen that her brilliant, successful son-in-law Jamal had struck gold in a cryptocurrency venture and was footing the entire bill. She claimed Jamal had bought out 15 luxury ski-in ski-out villas to honor her anniversary. She paraded him around the country club as the ultimate provider. The reality was entirely different. Jamal did not pay a single cent. Patricia did not pay a single cent. I had used my executive status to secure the absolute best villas at our flagship Aspen property during the absolute peak of ski season. The total cost was $150,000, and it had been charged directly to my corporate-linked personal black card. I had agreed to pay for it because Patricia had cried to me about how much she needed this event to maintain her social standing after my father passed. I had funded the private chefs, the chartered ski lifts, the imported champagne, and the heated outdoor event tents. My mother's only request to me regarding the trip was that I stay in the background during the professional photo shoots, so my presence as a single mother would not throw off the elegant aesthetic of her perfect family. I stared at the reservation details on my screen. All the names of her country club friends were neatly arranged in the guest manifest. The itinerary was flawless. It was a $150,000 masterpiece of event planning, handed to people who had just tossed two mildewed sleeping bags at my 8-year-old daughter. I rested my hand on the trackpad. I moved the cursor to the top right corner of the reservation portal. A bright red button sat there waiting. It read, "Modify or cancel reservation." I clicked it. The system immediately generated a warning prompt in bold text. "Are you sure you want to cancel this VIP corporate booking? This reservation is for 15 premium properties during peak season. This action cannot be undone, and the properties will immediately be released to the public waitlist." I did not hesitate. I did not feel a single ounce of guilt. I clicked confirm. The screen loaded for a brief second before a bright green checkmark flashed across the display. Booking canceled. $150,000 refunded to the original payment method. I stared at the confirmation text, feeling a massive suffocating weight lift off my shoulders. I closed the laptop with a soft, definitive click. I leaned back in the plush leather chair of the presidential suite, gazing out at the snow falling over the city skyline. A slow, satisfied smirk spread across my face. My mother and brother-in-law thought they had won the battle tonight. They thought they had successfully put me in my place. But the real game just started. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the presidential suite, waking me up on Black Friday morning. I stretched against the crisp Egyptian cotton sheets, feeling more rested than I had in months. Next to me, Mia was already awake, happily eating room-service strawberry pancakes while wrapped in a plush white hotel robe. There was no drafty basement, no dusty sleeping bags, and no sound of Brittany's toy poodle yapping down the hall. There was only peace, warmth, and the quiet realization that I had finally taken my power back. I kissed Mia on the forehead and walked into the private study with a fresh cup of coffee. I opened my laptop and pulled up my financial dashboard. Last night I had canceled the $150,000 Aspen trip. That was just the appetizer. Now it was time to cut the main lifeline. I dialed the direct concierge line for my private wealth management bank. Because of my account tier, a representative answered on the very first ring. I verified my identity and instructed the agent to pull up the supplementary black card attached to my master account. This specific card had Patricia's name printed on the front, but the monthly statements came directly to my inbox. For years, she had called it her household emergency fund. Over time, that emergency fund had morphed into daily luxury spa visits, designer handbags for Brittany, and whatever expensive tech gadgets Jamal desired. They treated my credit limit like an endless fountain of free cash. I told the banking agent I was reporting the supplementary card for misuse and requested an immediate permanent freeze. The agent asked if I wanted to issue a replacement card to the authorized user. I firmly said no. I instructed him to sever the card from my master line of credit entirely. The agent processed the request in seconds, confirming that any future transactions attempted on Patricia's card would be immediately and permanently declined. I thanked him and ended the call. Next, I opened my email client and started a new draft to my personal attorney, Marcus. The subject line was simple and direct: Asset Recovery Request. I began typing out the specifics for a legal repossession order. The asset in question was a brand new, fully loaded Range Rover. Just last month at our Sunday family dinner, Jamal had tossed the heavy leather key fob onto the dining table with a loud clatter. He had been wearing a tailored designer suit, pointing at me with his fork while lecturing me about finances. He told me that corporate drones like me would never understand real wealth. He bragged that he had made $30,000 while sleeping thanks to his cryptocurrency portfolio. He called my executive career a dead-end job, saying I was just a glorified maid for rich hotel guests. He boasted that true wealth came from being a visionary investor like him. I had stayed completely silent during that dinner, while Patricia nodded in enthusiastic agreement, telling Brittany how lucky she was to marry such a strong provider. They all conveniently ignored the massive, glaring truth. Jamal did not own a single share of cryptocurrency. He did not own a business. And he certainly did not own that Range Rover. 2 years ago, Patricia had come to my apartment crying because Jamal's old sedan had broken down. She claimed he needed a luxury vehicle to look successful and attract high net worth investors for his new startup. She begged me to co-sign a loan. I refused to co-sign, knowing his credit score was entirely destroyed. Instead, to get her to stop crying and to keep the family peace, I financed the car entirely under my name and my corporate LLC. It was legally my vehicle. I paid the massive down payment. I paid the monthly lease. I paid the premium insurance. Jamal was merely an authorized driver operating my property. I typed out the instructions to Marcus with absolute clarity. I wanted Jamal's driving authorization revoked immediately. I wanted a professional repossession team dispatched to collect my vehicle, no matter where it was parked. I hit send, watching the email vanish into my outbox. It was Black Friday. I checked the gold clock on the desk. It was 10 in the morning. I knew exactly what my family was doing right now. Patricia, Brittany, and Jamal treated Black Friday shopping like a royal procession. They would be at the luxury boutiques downtown, fueled by leftover turkey and an unwarranted sense of superiority. They would be browsing the high-end display cases, completely oblivious to the fact that the financial ground had just collapsed beneath their feet. I imagined them walking into their favorite stores. I imagined Patricia demanding VIP treatment, waving her black card around like a magic wand. I imagined Brittany pointing at expensive items, telling her mother which ones she absolutely needed for her aesthetic social media posts. I stepped away from the desk and walked over to the window, looking out at the bustling snow-covered city below. My phone chimed with a crisp, sharp alert. I picked it up. It was an automated fraud prevention text message directly from my bank. Attempted transaction declined. Card ending in 4829. Merchant Rolex Boutique. Amount $22,500. Status blocked due to account freeze. Less than a minute later, a second alert popped up on my screen. Attempted transaction declined. Card ending in 4829. Merchant Rolex Boutique. Amount $22,500. Status blocked. Then came a third alert. The exact same amount. The exact same luxury watch store. The exact same humiliating rejection. Jamal was trying to buy himself a Rolex on my dime. He was probably standing at the pristine glass counter right now, his confident, arrogant smirk slipping off his face as the cashier handed the card back with a sympathetic, pitying look. I could perfectly picture the hot embarrassment spreading across his face as Patricia tried to argue with the store manager, demanding they run the card one more time because there must be a system error. There was no system error. I set the phone down on the polished marble counter, raised my ceramic mug, and took a slow, deeply satisfying sip of my coffee. The cleanup had officially begun. I opened the social media app on my phone, curious to see how my family was handling their morning. It did not take long to find Brittany. She had just gone live to her 50,000 followers, broadcasting from the heated passenger seat of the exact Range Rover my lawyers were currently tracking down for immediate repossession. She held a venti iced latte in one hand and adjusted her oversized designer sunglasses with the other. "Get ready for the ultimate Aspen countdown, you guys!" Brittany squealed into the camera, her voice echoing through the quiet study of my hotel suite. My mom literally rented out the most exclusive VIP resort in Aspen for her 40th anniversary vow renewal. We have 50 guests coming, private chefs, ski and ski out villas. Everything is fully comped. Honestly, this is just what happens when your family understands real wealth. Shout out to my amazing husband Jamal for making the right investments so we can live this lifestyle. Only the absolute elite can pull this off. Do not settle for a 9-to-5, ladies. I watched her blow a kiss to the camera before the video looped. The sheer level of false confidence was staggering. She was sitting in a car she did not own, bragging about a vacation that no longer existed, funded by a man who did not have a dime to his name. I closed the app, smiling at the brilliant irony of it all. While Brittany was busy performing for strangers on the internet, Patricia was executing her own performance in the real world. Friday mornings post-Thanksgiving were sacred to my mother. She always treated herself and three of her most influential judgmental country club friends to a full day of pampering at the Platinum Lotus, the most expensive spa in the county. I knew exactly how her morning was going. She would be draped in a plush silk robe, sipping cucumber water, and loudly dominating the conversation in the relaxation room. She would be telling Susan, Eleanor, and Margaret all about her fabulous son-in-law. She would brag about how Jamal paid off her mortgage and how he was funding this extravagant Aspen getaway. She would make sure everyone in the spa knew she was a woman of immense wealth and status. At exactly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, my phone screen lit up with an incoming call. The caller ID displayed Patricia's name. I let it ring 4 times, taking another leisurely sip of my coffee, before sliding my finger across the screen. Alyssa Patricia barked the second the line connected. Her voice was a tight, panicked hiss. "Call your stupid bank right this second." I kept my tone light and breezy. "Good afternoon, Mom. Is everything okay?" "No, everything is not okay," she snapped, her words tumbling out in a furious whisper. "I am standing at the front desk of the Platinum Lotus. I just treated the girls to the caviar facial package and Swedish massages. The bill is $2,000 and your ridiculous emergency card just declined." The machine literally said blocked. "Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" "Susan is standing right behind me. Fix it now. Tell them to lift the security freeze." I could picture the scene perfectly. Patricia standing at the marble counter, her face flushed red with humiliation, as the spa manager politely asked for another form of payment. Her wealthy friends exchanging knowing, whispered glances behind her back. "I am so sorry, Mom," I said, injecting just enough fake sympathy into my voice to infuriate her. "But I have no idea what is wrong with the bank. I did not put a security freeze on anything." "Then why is it declining?" she demanded, her voice rising in panic. "Run it again!" she yelled at someone in the background. "Run it again," I said. "It is a bank error." "It is a call." I tapped my fingernails against the wooden desk. "If my emergency card is not working, why do not you just have Jamal cover it?" I asked innocently. "I mean, he made $30,000 in his sleep last night, right? He is a cryptocurrency millionaire. $2,000 for a spa day should be pocket change for a visionary investor like him. Tell Jamal to handle it." There was a dead, suffocating silence on the other end of the line. Patricia knew exactly what I was doing. She knew Jamal did not have $2,000 to his name. She knew his credit cards had been maxed out for years. For the first time, she was trapped in the very lie she had created. "You vindictive, ungrateful little brat," Patricia hissed, her voice shaking with pure venom. "You are doing this on purpose because you are jealous. You are cutting off the card to ruin my day." "I am not ruining anything, Mom," I replied softly. "I am simply letting the man of the house take care of his family. Enjoy the rest of your spa day." I ended the call and placed the phone back on the desk. Patricia would now have to turn around, face her snobby friends, and beg one of them to cover her massive spa bill. The social humiliation would be agonizing for her, but it was only a fraction of what was coming. The weekend passed in a blur of frantic, ignored text messages from my family. They were annoyed about the credit card and furious about my absence, but they were still completely oblivious to the real danger. They still believed they held the upper hand. They still believed the Aspen trip was happening. As the new week began, the countdown to the anniversary trip entered its final phase. 50 of Patricia's most elite, wealthy, and highly critical friends were actively packing their bags. They were buying new designer ski gear. They were arranging transport to the airport. They were all talking about the magnificent, fully comped luxury vacation Patricia had promised them. My corporate dashboard showed the reality. The 15 villas at the Aspen Resort had already been rebooked by other paying guests. The private chefs had been reassigned to different parties. The heated event tents were dismantled. There was absolutely zero record of Patricia's name anywhere in the resort system. Yet, according to Brittany's relentless social media posts, the family was currently loading up their luggage to head to the airport. They were taking selfies with their boarding passes. They were bragging about the first-class lounge. 50 high society guests were boarding their flights expecting a red carpet welcome at a five-star winter wonderland. Patricia, Brittany, and Jamal were leading the procession, their heads held high with unearned arrogance. They had absolutely no idea that they were marching 50 prominent socialites straight into a catastrophic, spectacular dead end. They were walking blindly off a cliff, and the impact was going to be glorious. 1 week later, the highly anticipated Aspen trip finally arrived. I did not have to be there in person to witness the spectacular implosion of my mother's grandest illusion. As Vice President of Global Partnerships, I had full administrative access to the high-definition security cameras at all our flagship properties. I sat at my executive desk in Manhattan, sipping a fresh espresso while watching the live feed from the Aspen Resort VIP reception lobby. The audio feed was crystal clear, picking up every sound in the expansive room. The heavy oak and frosted glass doors swung open. Patricia strutted in first, acting as though she owned the mountain. She was draped in a massive, obnoxious white fur coat, wearing oversized Gucci sunglasses indoors. Brittany and Jamal flanked her like loyal bodyguards. They were all completely covered in flashy designer logos, treating the luxury resort lobby like their personal runway. Behind them trailed 50 of Patricia's most judgmental country club friends. These were people who thrived on gossip, social hierarchy, and destroying reputations. They had paid for their own expensive flights under the strict promise that Patricia and Jamal were footing the bill for a week of unparalleled luxury. They dragged heavily packed suitcases, loudly complaining about the altitude and demanding immediate service from the bellhops. Patricia marched straight up to the VIP concierge desk. She did not wait in line. She bypassed a waiting family and slammed her gloved hand down on the polished mahogany counter. "I am Patricia," she announced, her voice echoing off the vaulted timber ceilings. "I am here for my VIP 40th anniversary block. We require the keys to our 15 presidential villas immediately. Have the imported champagne sent up to the main lodge, and I want the general manager to personally escort my group." The desk agent, a meticulously trained professional named Julian, offered a polite, practiced smile. He tapped his keyboard. "Welcome to Aspen, ma'am. Let me pull up that itinerary for you. You said the reservation is under Patricia?" "Yes," Patricia snapped, waving her hand impatiently. "Hurry up, my guests are tired." Julian typed for a few seconds. His polite smile remained, but his brow furrowed slightly. "I apologize, ma'am. I am not seeing any reservations under your name." Patricia scoffed loudly, ensuring the 50 guests behind her could hear every word. "Obviously, it is under my son-in-law's name. Jamal Blackwood. He is a cryptocurrency millionaire. He bought out the entire VIP wing for me. Check his name." Jamal stepped forward, puffing out his chest and adjusting the collar of his designer ski jacket. He offered Julian a condescending smirk. "Check the VIP ledger, buddy. It is a $150,000 booking." Julian typed again. The silence in the lobby stretched out. The country club guests began shifting uncomfortably, murmuring among themselves. "Sir, I have checked the entire system," Julian said, his voice calm and professional. "There are absolutely no reservations under the name Jamal Blackwood. In fact, we have no active bookings for a 50-person party arriving today." Patricia's face turned a dangerous shade of crimson. Brittany immediately pulled out her phone, holding it up high to record the interaction for her followers. "This is completely unacceptable," Brittany yelled at the camera. "We are literally at the most expensive resort in Aspen, and their system is completely broken. Look at this terrible customer service." Patricia slammed her hand on the desk again, much harder this time. The loud smack made several guests jump in surprise. "Do you have any idea who I am? We flew all the way here on private charters. I have 50 elite guests standing in your lobby. We have 15 presidential villas booked. Fix your pathetic computer system right now, or I will have you fired before lunch." The country club friends were no longer murmuring. They were openly complaining. Susan, the most notoriously vicious gossip of the group, stepped forward. Patricia, what on earth is going on? I did not fly all the way to Colorado to stand in a lobby like a commoner. Julian did not flinch under the pressure. He simply typed a master override code into his terminal. Ah, I do see a record here. There was a corporate booking for 15 presidential villas for this exact date range. Patricia let out a loud, dramatic sigh of relief, turning back to her friends with a triumphant smile. See, I told you. These incompetent workers always need to be yelled at to do their jobs properly. She turned back to Julian, crossing her arms. Well, give us our keys. I cannot do that, ma'am, Julian replied, his voice dropping to a cold, authoritative tone. As I stated, this is a past record. The entire block of 15 villas was manually cancelled and fully refunded 5 days ago. The villas have already been rebooked by other paying guests. We are currently at 100% capacity. There are no rooms available for your party. The entire lobby went dead silent. The 50 guests stared at Patricia in absolute shock. Cancelled! Patricia screamed, her voice cracking with hysteria. What do you mean cancelled, Jamal? Tell him to fix it. Tell him you paid for it. Jamal opened his mouth, but no words came out. His arrogant posture deflated instantly. He looked frantically at the desk, then at the angry crowd of rich socialites standing behind him. This is a mistake, Patricia shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Julian. You cancelled my reservation by mistake. I will sue this entire resort. I want the name of the person who cancelled my trip right now. Julian did not argue. He did not apologize. He simply took hold of the large computer monitor and swiveled it completely around so the bright screen faced Patricia, Jamal, and Brittany. I leaned closer to my own monitor, watching the security feed as Patricia leaned in to read the text. The letters were massive and highlighted in red. Status canceled. Refund issued $150,000. Authorized by corporate headquarters. Account holder, Vice President of Global Partnerships, Alyssa Wilson. Patricia froze completely. Her eyes widened in absolute horror as she read my name. All the color drained from her face, leaving her looking pale and suddenly very old. Brittany lowered her phone, her mouth hanging open in silent shock. Jamal took a physical step backward, bumping directly into Susan. Susan adjusted her glasses and read the screen aloud for the rest of the group to hear. Alyssa Wilson. Patricia, is that not your older daughter? The one you always say is a struggling, bitter single mother. Why is her name on the corporate account? I thought Jamal paid for this. The realization hit the crowd of elite guests like a massive shockwave. Jamal did not pay for this trip. Patricia did not arrange anything. They had been bragging for months about a lavish vacation funded entirely by the daughter they constantly belittled and degraded behind her back. And that same daughter had just left them stranded in the freezing mountains with 50 angry wealthy people and nowhere to sleep. Patricia fixed this immediately, Susan demanded, her voice dripping with venom. Book us new rooms right now. Put it on your card. Patricia swallowed hard, terror flashing in her eyes. She knew her card was frozen. She knew Jamal was broke. They were standing in one of the most expensive zip codes on Earth without a single dollar of usable credit between them. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my espresso, watching the glorious panic unfold on my monitor. My private office in the Manhattan corporate headquarters was an oasis of absolute calm. The soundproof glass blocked out the relentless noise of the city traffic below. I sat back in my ergonomic leather chair, my hands steepled together, watching the high-definition security feed from the Aspen Resort lobby. On my monitor, the scene was rapidly devolving from shock into pure, unadulterated panic. Patricia was frantically digging through her oversized designer bag. Her hands were shaking so violently that she dropped her expensive sunglasses onto the polished stone floor. She completely ignored them. She finally yanked her smartphone out of the depths of her purse, her face a rigid mask of desperate fury. A second later, the private cell phone resting on my mahogany desk began to vibrate. The caller ID flashed brightly on the screen. Patricia. I let it ring. Once, twice, 3 times. I took a slow, deliberate breath, centering myself. I wanted her to sweat. I wanted the silence in that Aspen lobby to stretch out until the tension became absolutely unbearable. On the fourth ring, I tapped the screen and accepted the call. I kept my voice incredibly light, projecting the polished, untouchable demeanor I used in high-stakes boardroom negotiations. "Good afternoon, Patricia," I said smoothly. "Listen to me, you worthless little witch!" Patricia shrieked into the phone. Her voice was so loud I had to hold the device slightly away from my ear. "I do not know what kind of pathetic game you think you are playing, but you are going to fix this system error right now. Do you hear me? I have 50 VIP guests standing in this freezing lobby. You are going to get on your little computer, you are going to fix whatever glitch you caused, and you are going to get us our keys." I glanced back at the security feed. Patricia was holding her phone out in front of her, pointing the bottom of the device toward the crowd. She had actually put me on speakerphone. Her ego was so massive, so completely blinding, that she thought she could use this moment to show off her dominance. She wanted Susan, Eleanor, Margaret, and all the other country club socialites to hear her put me in my place. She wanted them to witness her commanding the situation like a true matriarch. It was the greatest gift she could have ever given me. "I'm afraid there is no system error, Mom," I replied, my voice projecting clearly through the speaker of her phone, echoing off the high timber ceilings of the Aspen Lodge. "Do not lie to me!" Patricia screamed, stomping her designer boot against the floor. "The manager just said the rooms were canceled. Fix it!" I leaned forward, my tone dropping into a deadly icy calm. I enunciated every single syllable so that all 50 people in that lobby would hear me perfectly. "The system is not broken. I canceled the reservations manually. I completely revoked the booking for the 15 presidential villas, and I reclaimed my $150,000 payment. The refund is already sitting safely in my corporate account." The silence that fell over the Aspen lobby was absolute. On the security feed, I saw 50 heads snap toward Patricia in perfect unison. "What are you talking about?" Patricia gasped, her voice suddenly losing its venom, replaced by a hollow, creeping terror. "You cannot do this. Jamal paid for this trip. You are just jealous." "We both know Jamal has not paid for a single thing in his entire life," I said smoothly, letting the absolute truth ring out for her entire social circle to hear. "Jamal is completely broke. I paid for this vacation. I funded the villas, the private chefs, and the heated event tents. I did it because you begged me to help you maintain your precious social standing. But then I realized something over Thanksgiving. I paused, letting the heavy weight of the moment hang in the frigid mountain air. I decided that an unstable, bitter single mother, who does not even deserve a bed in the guest room, should not be financing your luxury lifestyle. I figured a woman who gets thrown out into a blizzard over a toy poodle should probably keep her hard-earned money to herself, so I cut the cord. The reaction from the crowd was instantaneous. Susan, the undisputed queen of their country club gossip ring, stepped forward. Her eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and predatory delight. Patricia Susan demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory. "Did Alyssa pay for this trip? Have you been lying to us this entire time?" Eleanor chimed in from the back, waving her boarding pass in the air. "She told everyone Jamal was a cryptocurrency millionaire. She swore he rented the entire VIP wing for us. She does not even have rooms for us," another guest yelled indignantly, dropping his heavy ski bag onto the floor. "We flew all the way out here on our own dime for absolutely nothing." On my screen, Patricia looked like she was going to be physically sick. Her meticulously crafted illusion of wealth and superiority was crumbling to dust in front of the exact people she was desperate to impress. Her mouth opened and closed, but she had absolutely no defense. The undeniable truth was staring her right in the face. Suddenly, Jamal lunged forward. He shoved Patricia aside and snatched the phone from her trembling hands. His face was twisted in a mixture of profound embarrassment and violent, desperate rage. "You absolute psycho!" Jamal roared into the speaker. His deep voice boomed through the lobby, drawing the attention of the resort security guard stationed near the entrance. "You think you can just pull the rug out from under us? You think you can embarrass me like this? I am going to destroy you. I will sue you for breach of contract." I am calling my lawyers right now, and we are going to take everything you have. I let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was a cold, highly amused sound that echoed right back at him through the speaker. Sue me for what, Jamal? I asked sweetly. For canceling a corporate vacation booked under my own name with my own corporate credit card. You do not have a contract. You do not have a lawyer. You do not even have a working credit card to buy a Rolex, do you? Jamal froze completely. His eyes darted around the lobby in pure panic as he realized I knew all about his failed, humiliating shopping spree at the boutique. Oh, and Jamal, I added, ensuring my voice was crisp and clear. You might want to figure out a new way to get home. By the time you land back in the city, that brand new Range Rover you have been driving will already be gone. I revoked your driving authorization this morning. The repossession tow trucks have already collected it. Before he could scream another useless, empty threat, I reached out and tapped the red button on my screen. I disconnected the call, plunging the Aspen lobby back into total chaos. I sat back in my plush leather chair, taking another sip of my espresso. I watched the silent security feed as 50 furious stranded guests began to completely surround Patricia and Jamal. They were demanding answers, demanding hotel accommodations, and demanding immediate reimbursement for their expensive flights. The resort manager was already picking up his radio to call security to clear the lobby. The false confidence was dead. The panic had officially begun. The sharp click of the disconnected call echoed loudly through the Aspen lobby, amplifying the absolute silence that had fallen over the crowd. Through the high-definition security feed on my office monitor, I watched the immediate aftermath of my departure. Jamal stood frozen, staring down at Patricia's phone in his hand, as if the device itself had physically burned him. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking sickly and small beneath his oversized, heavily branded ski jacket. For a few seconds, no one moved. The 50 elite country club guests, draped in their cashmere and fur, simply stared at the family they had once envied. Then Jamal's survival instinct kicked in. It was the same arrogant, foolish instinct that had allowed him to fake his way through life for years. He shoved the phone back at Patricia and puffed out his chest desperately, trying to salvage his shattered ego in front of the wealthy audience. He forced a loud, booming laugh that sounded entirely unnatural. "Who do you think you are?" Jamal yelled at the ceiling, pretending I was still on the line, acting as though my hanging up was a sign of weakness rather than a declaration of war. "You think we need your money? You are nothing." He turned around to face the crowd of restless, whispering guests. He raised his hands in a placating gesture, flashing his signature salesman smile. "Listen, everyone. Please remain calm." Jamal announced, his voice dripping with forced bravado. "My sister-in-law has always been a deeply jealous, unstable woman. She is just trying to create drama because she is miserable in her own life. But do not worry. You are rolling with a visionary investor. I told you I was going to take care of you, and I am going to take care of you. We do not need her charity." Jamal spun around and marched right back up to the mahogany concierge desk. He leaned over the counter, glaring down at Julian. "Find us rooms," Jamal ordered, speaking slowly and aggressively. "I do not care if you have to kick other people out. I want 15 of your best available suites right now. And put the entire group's tab on my personal tab." With a theatrical flourish, Jamal reached into his jacket pocket, pulled out a heavy black credit card, and slammed it down onto the marble counter. I leaned closer to my monitor, a wide, genuine smile spreading across my face. I recognized that card instantly. It was the supplementary black card with Patricia's name printed on the front. The exact same card I had permanently frozen and reported for misuse on the morning of Black Friday. Jamal was so utterly clueless about his own family's finances that he actually thought Patricia's magical emergency fund was still active. Julian, maintaining the icy, unflappable professionalism of a high-end luxury hotel manager, did not argue. He picked up the heavy metal card, tapped a few keys on his terminal, and swiped it through the reader. A sharp, flat, electronic beep echoed through the lobby. It was the universal sound of a declined transaction. Julian looked at the screen, his expression completely blank. He looked back up at Jamal. "Sir, this card has been declined." Jamal's confident smile faltered. He let out a nervous chuckle, glancing over his shoulder at the 50 guests who were now watching him like hawks. "That is impossible," Jamal scoffed, waving his hand dismissively. "It is a premium black card. There is no limit. Your machine is broken. Run it again." Julian did not swipe the card again. He simply read the bright red text flashing on his monitor. "Sir, the machine is functioning perfectly. The terminal indicates that this specific account has been permanently locked due to suspected fraud and misuse. The issuing bank has instructed us to confiscate the card if presented." Julian smoothly slid the black card under the counter, dropping it into a secure lockbox. The word fraud ripped through the lobby like a gunshot. The country club women gasped audibly. Susan stepped forward, her eyes narrowing as she glared at Patricia. "Fraud," Susan repeated loudly, ensuring every single guest heard the word. "You brought us here on fraudulent credit cards." Patricia looked like she was going to pass out. She grabbed the edge of a leather armchair to steady herself, her mouth opening and closing without producing a single sound. Brittany rushed forward, grabbing Jamal's arm. "Jamal, fix this!" she hissed frantically. "Use your crypto accounts. Use your investment cards. Do something. You are embarrassing me." Jamal was sweating now. Actual beads of perspiration were forming on his forehead, despite the chilly mountain air drafting in from the entrance. He frantically dug into his wallet, pulling out a handful of his own personal credit cards. He slapped a platinum Visa down on the counter. "Use this one," Jamal demanded, his voice cracking slightly. Julian swiped the Visa. "Beep, declined." "Try this one," Jamal shouted, slamming down a gold American Express. Julian swiped it. "Beep, declined." "Run this one," Jamal yelled, his hands physically shaking as he tossed a silver rewards card across the marble. Julian swiped it. "Beep, declined." I watched the glorious, pathetic display from my office, savoring every single second of their ruin. I knew exactly why those cards were declining. Brittany's daily shopping sprees, her designer handbags, her constant need to project an elite aesthetic on social media had drained every last cent they had. They were drowning in debt. Their credit limits had been maxed out for months. They had been surviving entirely on the illusion of wealth, using my money to float their fake lifestyle. And now the money was gone. Julian pushed the 3 useless pieces of plastic back across the counter. "Sir, every single card you have presented is registering as severely overdrawn. You have 0 available credit. I must ask you to step away from the desk." The illusion was officially dead. The reaction from the 50 VIP guests was absolute and merciless. High society elites did not tolerate liars, and they certainly did not tolerate being inconvenienced by broke frauds. Susan let out a sharp, mocking laugh that cut right through the tension in the room. She looked at Patricia with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "You are completely broke," Susan said, her voice dripping with venomous clarity. "You paraded around the country club for months bragging about your visionary son-in-law and your unlimited wealth. You dragged us all the way to Colorado on a lie. You are nothing but pathetic con artists." Patricia reached out a trembling hand. "Susan, please, there must be a misunderstanding. We can figure this out." "Do not speak to me," Susan snapped, pulling her designer coat tightly around her shoulders. "We are leaving. I am calling private cars to take us to the Four Seasons. You will be hearing from my attorneys regarding the reimbursement for our charter flights." The rest of the guests immediately followed Susan's lead. They turned their backs on my family in absolute unison. The lobby filled with the sound of 50 wealthy, furious people pulling out their phones, calling their own transportation, and loudly gossiping about the legendary downfall of Patricia Wilson. They began dragging their expensive luggage toward the exit, laughing and smirking as they abandoned my mother in the center of the room. Patricia stood completely alone. The country club friends she had worshipped, the social standing she had sacrificed her own daughter to maintain, vanished before her eyes. The social execution was swift and total. On the security feed, I saw Patricia's knees buckle. She gasped for air, clutching the fabric of her coat directly over her chest. Her eyes rolled back, and she physically collapsed, dropping heavily onto one of the plush velvet sofas in the center of the lobby. The heavy silence of the lobby pressed down on the three of them. Through the security camera feed, I watched as Patricia struggled to catch her breath. Her chest heaved beneath her absurdly large white fur coat. The 50 guests she had desperately tried to impress were gone, leaving behind only the echo of their rolling suitcases and mocking laughter. Brittany knelt beside our mother, fanning her with a glossy resort brochure, her own face streaked with ruined mascara. Jamal stood a few feet away, staring blankly at the marble floor, completely paralyzed by the catastrophic failure of his own con. Julian, the incredibly patient desk manager, stepped out from behind his mahogany counter. He approached the velvet sofa with a posture of practiced authority. He did not offer Patricia a glass of water. He did not ask if she needed medical attention. He simply clasped his hands in front of him and delivered the fatal blow. "Ma'am," Julian said, his voice carrying perfectly across the empty reception area. "This is a private VIP lounge reserved exclusively for registered guests. Since all your payment methods have been declined and your original booking was canceled by the account holder, I must ask you to secure a new form of payment immediately. If you cannot produce a valid card to cover a reservation, you will need to vacate the premises." The words snapped Brittany out of her panic. She sprang up, pointing an acrylic fingernail at Julian. "You cannot kick us out. It is freezing outside. We have nowhere to go. My husband is a millionaire." She spun around to face Jamal, grabbing the front of his jacket. Jamal stopped standing there like an idiot. "Transfer your crypto funds. Call your broker. Book the presidential villa in cash right now. Show this guy who we are." Jamal swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed nervously. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The truth was finally cornering him. Jamal was not a cryptocurrency visionary. He had never been an elite investor. 3 years ago, he had convinced Patricia to take out a massive second mortgage on her home, promising her a guaranteed return on a brilliant new digital coin. He had dumped every single penny of her money, along with his own meager savings, into what turned out to be an incredibly obvious Ponzi scheme. The creators vanished overnight, taking everything. Since that day, Jamal had been frantically covering his tracks. He opened high-interest credit cards, took out predatory personal loans, and secretly siphoned money from my corporate accounts whenever I left a card unattended. He had been playing a desperate game of musical chairs with crushing debt, terrified of the day the music would stop. Now the music was dead silent. "I need to make a call," Jamal mumbled, pulling away from Brittany's grip. He paced toward the large panoramic windows, pressing the phone to his ear. I turned up the audio feed on my dashboard. Jamal was calling his so-called investment buddies, the men he supposedly made thousands of dollars with every week. "Hey, Marcus," Jamal whispered frantically into the receiver. "Man, I am in a bind. I am out in Aspen and my accounts are temporarily frozen. I need you to wire me 10 grand. Just until Tuesday. I will pay you back double." There was a pause, then a loud scoffing laugh echoed through the phone's speaker. 10 grand, Marcus replied, his voice dripping with amusement. "Bro, you owe me $4,000 from last year. Your car just got repossessed this morning. Everyone in the city knows you are broke. Do not ever call this number again." The line went dead. Jamal frantically dialed another number, his breathing turning ragged. "Hey, Leo. It is Jamal. I need a massive favor. Just a quick wire transfer to cover a hotel block. I am good for it, you know me." "No, I do not know you," Leo answered coldly. "You are a fraud, Jamal. You owe half the neighborhood money. Stop calling people." Jamal lowered the phone. His broad shoulders slumped in absolute defeat. He turned back to face his wife and mother-in-law. He had no more lies to spin. He had no more fake confidence to project. He walked slowly back to the sofa, looking everywhere but at Brittany's expectant face. "I cannot get the funds to clear," Jamal muttered, his voice barely a whisper. "The banking network is down. We cannot stay here." Brittany let out a shrill, piercing scream of frustration. She slapped his chest, her designer rings catching on his jacket. "What do you mean we cannot stay here? We have no cars. We have no hotel. We are in the middle of a mountain." Patricia groaned, burying her face in her hands. This is a nightmare. This is absolute social suicide. I can never show my face at the club again. Julian had seen and heard enough. He raised his hand and gave a sharp, subtle nod to the entrance. Instantly, two towering security guards in crisp black suits stepped forward. They moved with silent, intimidating efficiency. Ladies, Sir Julian said, his tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. It is time for you to leave. Patricia tried to protest, opening her mouth to demand respect, but one of the guards simply picked up her heavy Louis Vuitton suitcase by the handle. The other guard grabbed Jamal's ski bag. Please head toward the exit, the guard instructed firmly. We will escort your luggage to the curb. If you refuse to comply, we will be forced to contact local law enforcement to have you removed for trespassing. There was no grand exit. There was no final devastating insult Patricia could hurl to save her pride. The security guards marched them straight to the heavy oak and frosted glass doors. Brittany was sobbing loudly, her cries echoing off the stone walls as she dragged her feet. Jamal walked with his head down, utterly humiliated, avoiding eye contact with the few remaining resort staff members. Patricia stumbled behind them, clutching her white fur coat tightly around her trembling frame, her posture completely broken. The guards pushed the heavy doors open. A blast of freezing aspen wind and swirling snow swept into the warm, luxurious lobby. They deposited the designer luggage on the icy concrete curb and stepped back inside. As I sat in my quiet Manhattan office thousands of miles away, I watched the heavy oak doors swing firmly shut, locking my family out in the freezing mountain storm. The heavy oak doors swung firmly shut, locking them out in the freezing mountain storm. Outside, the aspen wind was absolutely merciless. The temperature was plunging rapidly into the single digits, and thick wet snow was beginning to fall heavily, coating the immaculate resort driveway in a layer of slippery white slush. Patricia, draped in her absurdly large white fur coat, instantly began to shiver violently. Her designer heels slipped on the icy concrete as she stumbled away from the entrance, completely stripped of her previous arrogance. Brittany clutched her arms tightly around herself, her teeth chattering so loudly I could hear it through the exterior security microphones. She looked at Jamal, her mascara completely smeared down her pale, freezing cheeks. Jamal was frantically tapping on his phone, his thumbs swiping aggressively across the screen as he tried to find any available motel in the area. Find something! Brittany sobbed, stomping her designer boots against the pavement to stay warm. A Motel 6, a Holiday Inn, a hostel, anything. I cannot freeze to death out here on the curb. Jamal's hands were shaking so violently he nearly dropped his phone into a snowbank. I am trying, he snapped, his voice tight with panic. Every single card is declining on the booking apps. I cannot even get a $20 deposit to clear. I am completely locked out of everything. Patricia let out a dramatic wail, leaning heavily against a frozen stone pillar for support. My friends are sleeping in the Four Seasons right now, and I am standing on a curb like a common vagrant, she cried, pulling her coat tighter around her neck. This is a nightmare. Do something, Jamal. The crunch of heavy tires on fresh snow interrupted their pathetic pity party. A massive industrial tow truck, its bright amber lights flashing piercingly through the storm, backed slowly into the VIP parking circle. It bypassed the line of luxury sedans and headed straight for the sleek black Range Rover that Jamal had paid a private transport service to drive up from the city just to impress Patricia's country club friends. Jamal's head snapped up. His eyes widened in absolute horror as the tow truck driver lowered the hydraulic lift right in front of the Range Rover's customized bumper. Hey, Jamal, yelled, his voice cracking with desperation. Hey, get away from that! What do you think you are doing? Jamal sprinted across the icy driveway, slipping twice and nearly falling before reaching the truck. The driver, a burly man in a heavy, high-visibility jacket, stepped out of his warm cab. He held a metal clipboard and looked completely unbothered by Jamal's aggressive, flailing approach. Are you Jamal Blackwood? The driver asked in a bored, monotone voice. I am the owner of that vehicle, Jamal barked, puffing out his chest and trying to look intimidating. You touch it, and I will have you arrested for grand theft auto. Step away from my car, right now. The driver let out a dry, raspy chuckle. He tapped his pen against the metal clipboard. Actually, buddy, you are not the owner. I have a court-certified repossession order right here. The driver turned the clipboard around so Jamal could see the bold black text. Legal owner is listed as Alyssa Wilson under the Global Partnership's corporate fleet, and I have a direct expedited order from her to recover this asset immediately due to severe financial fraud risks. Back in my Manhattan office, I watched the entire exchange through the high-definition body camera feed worn by the repo agent streaming directly to my desktop monitor. I had anticipated this exact scenario. Jamal loved that Range Rover more than he loved his own wife. It was the ultimate prop in his fake millionaire lifestyle. I had purchased that car 2 years ago as a company vehicle. I foolishly let them use it under the strict condition that they pay the insurance and maintenance. They had not paid a single dime in 6 months. Jamal slapped the clipboard out of the driver's hand. It clattered loudly onto the icy pavement. That is a lie, Jamal screamed, spit flying from his mouth as his temper flared. She gave me this car. It is mine. Brittany, get the keys. We are leaving right now. Brittany fumbled desperately in her designer bag, pulling out the silver key fob with trembling fingers. But before she could take a single step off the curb, the sharp, piercing chirp of a police siren cut through the howling mountain wind. A local Aspen police cruiser pulled swiftly into the circular driveway, its red and blue lights reflecting brightly off the falling snow. 2 uniformed officers stepped out into the storm. They looked incredibly stern, entirely unamused by the wealthy-looking people causing a public disturbance outside a luxury resort. "Is there a problem here, Gary?" the lead officer asked the tow truck driver, resting his hand casually on his utility belt. "Just a standard corporate repo," Officer Gary replied calmly, picking up his clipboard from the slush. "But this gentleman is getting physically aggressive and refusing to let me hook up the asset." Jamal spun around to face the cops, his sense of entitlement completely blinding him to the reality of the situation. "He is trying to steal my car," Jamal yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Gary. "Arrest him. Do your jobs. I know the chief of police in this town." The lead officer did not flinch. He walked slowly toward Jamal, his expression hardening into stone. "Sir, I have already reviewed the legal paperwork for this repossession. The vehicle belongs to a corporate fleet. You are not the registered owner and you have zero legal right to this vehicle. Step away from the car right now." Jamal lost whatever tiny shred of sanity he had left. His entire fake millionaire persona had been ripped away. His credit was dead. His mother-in-law's social standing was ruined. And now his ultimate status symbol was being dragged away on a flatbed truck in front of the police. He lunged forward, grabbing the heavy steel chain of the tow truck to physically stop Gary from hooking it to the Range Rover's front axle. "You are not taking it!" Jamal roared, his voice echoing wildly off the mountain peaks. The lead officer moved with lightning speed. He grabbed Jamal by the back of his expensive ski jacket, spinning him around forcefully and slamming him hard against the icy side of the Range Rover. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed sharply in the crisp, freezing air. Jamal Blackwood, the officer, commanded, his voice ringing with absolute authority. "You are interfering with a lawful repossession. If you resist me one more time, you are going straight into the back of my cruiser for assault and obstruction of justice. Put your hands behind your back." Jamal froze instantly. The fight drained completely out of his body as the cold steel pressed against his wrists. He squeezed his eyes shut, letting out a pathetic whimpering sob of total defeat. Behind him, Brittany completely lost her grip on reality. She dropped her expensive handbag directly into a dirty puddle of gray slush. She fell to her knees in the freezing snow, throwing her head back and screaming in pure hysterical despair. The shrill sound of her crying blended perfectly with the howling mountain wind. Patricia just stood frozen on the icy curb, watching her golden family crumble into absolute humiliating ruin, shivering uncontrollably in the storm. 4 days later, the high-definition security feeds and luxury ski lodges were completely replaced by the grim, unforgiving reality of a Greyhound bus terminal. With no credit cards, no cash, and absolutely no friends willing to wire them a single cent, Patricia, Brittany, and Jamal had been forced to endure a grueling 36-hour bus ride across the country. I did not need a security camera to picture the pathetic scene. I could easily imagine my mother still wrapped in her ruined, oversized white fur coat, crammed into a narrow, stained fabric seat right next to the chemical toilet. I could picture Brittany clutching her scuffed designer bag, weeping quietly as the bus rattled over highway potholes. And Jamal entirely stripped of his swagger, staring out the streaked window in utter defeat. The grand illusion of their elite social status had not just been shattered, it had been ground into the dirt. They finally arrived back at Patricia's house, a home that was currently teetering on the edge of foreclosure thanks to Jamal's brilliant crypto investments. The moment they stepped through the front door, my private cell phone began to light up. At first, Patricia chose pure, unadulterated rage. My screen filled with a barrage of frantic, venomous text messages. "You are an absolute monster. How could you humiliate us like that in front of Susan and Eleanor? You are completely dead to me. I will make sure everyone in the family knows what a psychopath you really are." I sat at my desk in Manhattan, sipping a fresh espresso, watching the angry messages scroll past. I did not type a single letter in response. Silence is the absolute worst punishment for a narcissist. It deprives them of the oxygen and attention they desperately need to keep fighting. By the second day, the crushing silence had clearly broken her. The arrogant rage evaporated rapidly, replaced by a cloying, desperate panic. The text messages stopped and the lengthy tear-soaked voicemails began. I hit play on the latest recording, leaning back in my ergonomic leather chair. "Alyssa, please." Patricia wept into the phone, her voice shaking with manufactured heartbreak. "Please pick up the phone. We have absolutely nothing to eat. The bank is calling me constantly about the mortgage. Jamal is facing serious legal trouble over the car. You cannot do this to us. You cannot do this to me. I am your mother. I gave birth to you. I raised you. You cannot just back us into a corner and leave me to die. Please show some compassion. You cannot push your own mother to the brink of ruin." She was using the ultimate manipulation tactic, weaponizing the concept of maternal love to force me back into submission. She truly believed that if she cried hard enough, if she played the desperate victim convincingly enough, I would automatically revert to the obedient check-writing daughter I had always been. She was completely wrong. I deleted the voicemail and opened my email client. I did not write to her directly. Instead, I instructed my corporate attorney to send a certified legal notice to Patricia's inbox with a physical copy sent via certified mail to her front door. I watched my outbox as the message successfully sent. The email was cold, highly clinical, and completely devastating. It was a formal legal demand for the immediate repayment of $50,000. Over the past 8 months, Patricia and Jamal had secretly siphoned funds from a secondary corporate credit card I had mistakenly left linked to her emergency household account. They had not used it for emergencies. I had the itemized statement sitting right in front of me on my desk. $5,000 at Louis Vuitton, $12,000 on a luxury watch for Jamal, $8,000 at a high-end day spa. They had funded their delusion with my hard-earned capital. The legal notice gave them exactly 14 days to repay the $50,000 in full. If the funds were not deposited into my corporate account by the deadline, my legal team would formally press charges for credit card fraud and unauthorized theft. I was not just cutting them off. I was holding them entirely accountable for every single cent they had stolen. An hour after the email was delivered, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID did not say Patricia. It flashed brightly with the name Thomas, my father. Thomas was a man who had perfected the art of looking the other way. For 30 years, he had enabled Patricia's toxic behavior, standing silently in the background, while she belittled my achievements and favored Brittany. He had never once defended me. He had never once told my mother she was wrong. He simply existed in the shadows, keeping his head down to avoid becoming her primary target. I accepted the call. "Hello, Dad," I said, my voice perfectly neutral. "Alyssa, what are you doing?" Thomas asked. His voice was heavy-laced with a disappointed, exhausted tone that immediately grated on my nerves. Your mother is hyperventilating in the kitchen. She just showed me the legal letter. $50,000. Pressing criminal charges. Do you have any idea what this stress is doing to her health? I remained completely silent, letting him speak. I know you are angry, Thomas continued, mistaking my silence for hesitation. I know they made some bad choices with the credit cards, but you are taking this entirely too far. She is your mother, Alyssa. Family is family. You have made your point, but this is just pure cruelty. You are being completely ruthless. You need to drop this lawsuit right now and help us figure out a payment plan for the house. He was doing exactly what he had always done. He was demanding the scapegoat set herself on fire to keep the golden child warm. He wanted me to absorb the financial damage so he would not have to deal with Patricia's daily tantrums. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the mahogany desk. Cruel? I asked, my voice dropping to a quiet, razor-sharp whisper. Yes, cruel, Thomas sighed heavily. You are destroying this family over money. Let me ask you a very simple question, Dad, I said, cutting him off completely. When I was 19 and I had to work 3 separate jobs just to pay for my community college tuition because Mom drained my entire college fund to pay for Brittany's extravagant destination wedding in Cabo, where was your concern for family then? The line went dead silent. When I was eating instant noodles in a freezing apartment while you and Mom bought Jamal a Rolex for his birthday, did you pull Mom aside and call her cruel? I continued, my voice steady and unyielding. Did you ever even once, in 30 years, tell Patricia that the way she treated me was ruthless? Thomas opened his mouth to speak. A faint, pathetic stammering sound came through the receiver, but no actual words formed. He was completely trapped in his own hypocrisy. I am not destroying this family, Dad, I stated, delivering the final undeniable truth. I am simply refusing to fund its delusion any longer. You have exactly 14 days to find the $50,000. I strongly suggest you start packing. I tapped the red button ending the call and set the phone face down on my desk. My phone barely rested on the mahogany wood for 3 seconds before the screen illuminated again. Thomas was calling back. He was persistent, driven by the absolute panic radiating from Patricia in their kitchen. I let it ring 4 times, savoring the image of him sweating under my mother's furious gaze, before I picked it up and pressed it back to my ear. Do not hang up on me, Alyssa, Thomas said immediately. His voice trembled with a pathetic mixture of fear and forced paternal authority. You cannot just walk away from this conversation. Anyway, she is your mother, and Brittany is your sister. You should not humiliate the family like this. We do not air our dirty laundry for the world to see. You are acting completely out of line. I leaned back in my chair, staring out at the Manhattan skyline. The sheer audacity of his words washed over me, but instead of making me angry, it only sharpened my focus. Humiliate the family. I repeated, my voice ice cold. Dad, the family humiliated itself. I simply stopped buying the tickets to the circus. You are talking about dirty laundry, but you have spent your entire life hiding in the laundry room, pretending the house is not burning down around you. Alyssa, please. Thomas pleaded, his tone dropping the fake authority and reverting to his usual whiny negotiation tactic. Be reasonable. You have plenty of money. $50,000 is nothing to your company. You can absorb this loss. If you pursue these criminal charges, you will destroy us. You will send Jamal to prison. You will ruin your sister's life. I am not the one who ruined Brittany's life, I stated clearly. Jamal did that when he conned all of you, and you did that when you enabled him. I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Thomas was silent. Do not play dumb with me, Dad, I continued, my voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel. Did you actually believe I would just freeze the credit cards and walk away without looking deeper? Did you really think I did not run a full comprehensive forensic audit on Jamal the second I noticed those fraudulent charges on my corporate accounts? Thomas let out a shaky breath. Alyssa, you do not understand. I understand everything, I interrupted. I know exactly where the money went. I tracked every single wire transfer Jamal made over the last 3 years. I know about the offshore crypto accounts. I know about the fake digital coins he bought into. And most importantly, Dad, I know about your retirement fund. The silence on the phone was absolute. I could almost hear his heart stop beating. I know that Jamal did not just convince Mom to take out a second mortgage on the house, I said, laying out the undeniable facts. I know he came to you first. I know you signed over your entire pension and your 401k to him because he promised you a 30% return. You handed him your entire life savings, and he lost every single penny of it in less than 4 months. Thomas let out a wretched choking sound. It was the sound of a man whose deepest, darkest secret had just been dragged out into the harsh light of day. You knew I pressed on, refusing to give him a single second to recover. You knew Jamal was a fraud. You knew he had bankrupted you. You knew you had absolutely nothing left for retirement. But instead of acting like a man and telling your wife the truth, you hid like a coward. You kept your mouth shut while Patricia paraded around the country club bragging about her wealthy son-in-law. Alyssa, I had to, Thomas cried, his voice breaking completely. You know how your mother is. If I told her I lost the retirement money to Jamal, she would have divorced me. She would have destroyed me. I was trying to protect the peace. I was trying to find a way to make the money back before she noticed. You were protecting yourself, I corrected him harshly. You watched Patricia drain my corporate cards to buy designer handbags and luxury spa days, and you said absolutely nothing. You knew she was stealing from your own daughter to fund a fake lifestyle, and you let it happen because it kept her distracted. You let her steal my capital so you would not have to face the consequences of your own stupidity. I was desperate, Thomas sobbed openly now. We were drowning. We needed the cash to keep up appearances. Please, Alyssa, I am begging you. If you expose this, if you tell your mother about the pension, it will kill her. She has nothing else. She never had anything, Dad, I replied, feeling a profound sense of closure. She only had the illusions you all built for her. And you sacrificed my well-being, my hard work, and my company just to keep her comfortable in her delusion. You allowed her to treat me like a disappointment my entire life, while secretly relying on my money to survive. I am sorry, Thomas wept. I am so sorry. Just please withdraw the legal notice. We will figure something out. I will get a second job. I will pay you back. Do not take the house away from your mother. I let his pathetic apologies wash over me, feeling absolutely nothing but a cold, clinical satisfaction. I am not taking the house away, Dad, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm whisper. The bank is taking the house. What are you talking about? Thomas stammered, confusion temporarily overriding his panic. The mortgage is in my name. You have nothing to do with the house. I tapped my pen against my desk, savoring the final, devastating reveal. 2 years ago, when Jamal convinced you to take out that massive second mortgage to cover his initial losses, your credit score was not high enough to secure the loan. You did not qualify. Do you remember how you miraculously got approved 3 days later? Thomas gasped. Patricia called me, I explained slowly, ensuring he understood every single word. She cried about needing a temporary co-signer just to push the paperwork through. She swore Jamal was going to pay it off in 6 months. I was still foolish enough to crave her approval back then, so I signed the documents. I became the primary financial guarantor on your home. I am the only reason you still have a roof over your head. Alyssa, no, Thomas breathed, the sheer terror in his voice unmistakable. I contacted my legal team this morning. I announced delivering the final blow. I have officially withdrawn my status as the financial guarantor on your property due to evidence of gross financial mismanagement and fraud. Because you have zero assets, zero retirement funds, and no valid credit, the bank immediately flagged the account. They are accelerating the debt. They will be sending the formal foreclosure notice to your front door tomorrow morning. The silence in my office was absolute, a perfect contrast to the utter chaos I knew was currently consuming my parents' household. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my espresso, letting the bitter warmth ground me. I had just dismantled their financial house of cards, and I knew exactly what would happen next. When a parasite is finally cut off from its host, it does not just quietly starve, it thrashes, it attacks. 2 days later, the retaliation arrived exactly as I had predicted. It did not come in the form of a legal challenge or a sincere apology. It came wrapped in a high-definition, tear-stained social media performance. My executive assistant, Clara, burst into my glass-walled office just after lunch. She was clutching her tablet with an expression of sheer, unadulterated panic. "Alyssa, you need to see this right now," Clara said, her voice shaking as she placed the screen on my desk. "Your sister posted a video this morning across all major platforms. It already has 500,000 views on TikTok alone, and people are aggressively tagging our corporate accounts." I leaned forward and pressed play. Brittany's face filled the screen. She had clearly spent hours meticulously styling herself to look like she had not slept in days. Her usually flawless salon-blown hair was tied in a messy frayed knot. She wore a plain, oversized gray sweatshirt instead of her usual designer labels. She stared directly into the camera, her eyes perfectly welling with calculated, glistening tears. "Hi, everyone," Brittany began, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "I never thought I would have to make a video like this. But my family is in immediate danger and I have nowhere else to turn. My older sister, Alyssa Wilson, the CEO of Global Partnerships, is trying to completely destroy us." Brittany wiped a single dramatic tear from her cheek, staring soulfully into the lens. Alyssa has always been jealous and controlling, but now that she is a highly successful executive, she has become an absolute monster. Yesterday, she sent a ruthless repo team to physically assault my husband Jamal and steal his car right out from under him. And why? Because Jamal is a black man who dared to be successful without her permission. She could not stand seeing us happy, so she used her expensive corporate lawyers to fabricate a racist fraud claim and take everything he worked for. The frame shifted, showing Jamal sitting on their living room couch. He had his head buried in his hands, playing the role of the broken, persecuted family man to absolute perfection. "But that is not even the worst part," Brittany choked out, pulling a piece of paper into the frame. It was the bank's official foreclosure notice. Alyssa is a millionaire, but she just legally forced the bank to foreclose on my elderly parents' home. She is throwing our mother and father out onto the street in the middle of a freezing winter, just out of pure malicious spite. She is a cold, heartless corporate sociopath, and she needs to be held accountable. The video ended with a direct link to a GoFundMe page Brittany had cleverly set up titled, "Save the Wilson Family Home." I scrolled through the comment section. Thousands of strangers were calling for my head. They demanded my company be boycotted immediately. They labeled me a racist, a ruthless capitalist villain, and a toxic, abusive family member. Right on cue, my personal cell phone began to vibrate violently against the mahogany wood of my desk. The viral video had successfully rallied the extended family troops. Relatives who had not bothered to speak to me in a decade were suddenly flooding my inbox with venomous, self-righteous outrage. Aunt Eleanor texted first. "You are a disgusting excuse for a human being. How dare you put your own mother on the street? You are completely dead to this family." Cousin Greg followed seconds later. "I always knew you were a cold person, Alyssa, but framing Jamal and using your lawyers to bully Brittany is a new low. Fix this right now, or I am going to the local press myself." Then came Patricia. Her text was short and dripping with triumphant malice. "I told you I would make sure everyone knew what a psychopath you really are. You brought this public humiliation on yourself. Transfer the $50,000 and give Jamal his car back immediately, or Brittany posts part 2 tonight." Clara stood anxiously by the door, wringing her hands. "Alyssa, the PR department is freaking out. Our main corporate inbox is getting flooded with hate mail. A few of our minor clients have already emailed asking for clarification on the racism and fraud allegations. Marcus wants to draft a press release immediately. We need to issue a formal apology or at least a public statement denying the claims. This is escalating too fast." I looked at Clara, then back at the paused image of Brittany's crying face on the tablet. They really thought this would work. They thought public shame would force me into immediate submission. They thought I would panic, write a massive check to make the bad press disappear, and quietly retreat into the shadows while they played the triumphant, vindicated victims. They assumed I would cower to protect my corporate image. They had completely underestimated who they were dealing with. We are not issuing an apology, Clara. I said, my voice perfectly steady and devoid of any anxiety. And we are not writing a defensive press release. You can go back to your desk. I will handle this entirely on my own. Clara looked hesitant, but nodded, backing out of the office and pulling the heavy glass door shut behind her. Alone in my office, the chaotic noise of the city completely muffled by the thick soundproof glass, I picked up my porcelain teacup. I took a slow, calming sip of my Earl Grey tea. I felt absolutely no fear. I felt no shame. I only felt the cold, undeniable thrill of a steel trap finally snapping shut. I turned to my dual monitor setup. I did not open social media to argue in the comments. I did not record a weeping, emotional response video to plead my case to strangers. Instead, I opened a secure, encrypted cloud drive I had meticulously compiled over the last 8 months. Inside the drive was a master folder. It contained everything. It held the high-definition, unedited body camera footage of Jamal attempting to physically assault the repo driver while screaming about how I bought the car for him. It held the irrefutable, certified bank statements showing exactly where Jamal had wired my father's stolen retirement funds. It contained the itemized credit card receipts proving Patricia and Jamal had spent $50,000 of my corporate funds on luxury resorts, designer bags, and high-end restaurants, not basic survival. It held the forged loan documents Patricia had illegally submitted to the bank using my signature. And finally, it held the crystal-clear audio recordings of Patricia's unhinged voicemails, openly admitting she drained my college fund and demanding I continue to pay for their lavish, fake lifestyle. I had anticipated Brittany's predictable smear campaign the very moment I decided to cut them off. Narcissists never go down quietly. They always run to the nearest audience to cry wolf. I copied the shareable link to the master folder. I pasted it directly onto my company's official public blog, pinned it to the top of my personal social media profiles, and replied to Brittany's viral video with a single, devastatingly simple caption. For anyone interested in donating to Brittany's GoFundMe, please review the attached legal and financial documentation of their active criminal fraud first. Proceed at your own risk. I moved my mouse over the screen. Without a single ounce of hesitation or regret, I firmly clicked public. The link went live instantly across every platform I possessed. I did not stop there. I compiled a mass email list containing every single relative who had spammed my inbox with their self-righteous vitriol over the past hour. I added the contact information of every prominent member of my mother's beloved country club, including Susan and Eleanor, whose email addresses I had saved from organizing Patricia's charity luncheons years ago. I dropped the link into the BCC line, hit send, and watched the digital bomb detonate. I sat perfectly still in my quiet, soundproof office, watching the analytics dashboard light up. I did not feel the need to jump into the comment sections to defend myself. I did not write a single accompanying paragraph of explanation. The truth does not require an emotional defense. It stands entirely on its own. Inside that public repository, there was absolutely no room for interpretation, manipulation, or debate. The first subfolder was dedicated entirely to Jamal. Beside the vehicle registration proving I was the sole legal owner of the Range Rover, preventing any false claims of racist theft, I uploaded the heavily itemized credit card statements Brittany had never bothered to review. Highlighting the specific transactions was incredibly easy. Jamal had not just been buying luxury watches. He had been actively funding a 22-year-old college student in Miami. The statements showed recurring charges for boutique hotels, direct cash transfers labeled as tuition assistance, and expensive receipts for designer lingerie. All of it was paid for using my stolen corporate funds while Brittany sat at home bragging to her followers about her devoted, wealthy husband. The second folder was curated specifically for Patricia. Over the years, my mother had treated me as her personal administrative assistant, forcing me to manage her digital calendar and sync her devices. She was entirely ignorant of how cloud backups worked. I had exported hundreds of her private text messages. I made sure to prominently feature the screenshots where Patricia viciously mocked the very women she played tennis with. There were brutal messages calling Eleanor a desperate aging cow with terrible plastic surgery. There were texts referring to Susan's husband as a cheap, pathetic loser who could barely afford their club dues. There were long, toxic threads complaining about how irritating and backward our extended family was, labeling her own sisters and cousins as tacky burdens dragging down her elite social image. But the final folder was the true centerpiece. I titled it The Golden Childhood. It contained a series of stark, high-resolution photographs I had taken years ago before moving out. Pictures of Brittany's massive sunlit bedroom overflowing with toys, electronics, and expensive clothes. And right next to them, the photos of my designated living space. The damp, unfinished concrete basement. The single thin sleeping bag laid out next to the humming water heater. The tiny space heater plugged into an exposed extension cord surrounded by boxes of holiday decorations. It was the raw, undeniable visual proof of exactly how the loving, victimized Wilson family treated their scapegoat behind closed doors. The internet moves with terrifying speed when presented with undeniable receipts. Within 20 minutes, the entire narrative violently inverted. My phone, which had been buzzing nonstop with hate mail, suddenly went dead silent from my relatives. Instead, the notifications shifted entirely to the social media platforms. Brittany's comments section, previously a unified echo chamber of support, turned into an absolute slaughterhouse. I opened her page and watched the destruction happen in real time. Her followers were vicious. They flooded her crying video with links to the drive. They tagged her sponsors. They demanded to know why she was crying for public donations while her husband was busy spending stolen corporate money on a sugar baby in Florida. I watched her follower count begin a rapid, irreversible freefall. People do not like being lied to, and they especially loathe being scammed out of their own money. The GoFundMe page she had linked was mass reported for fraud and suspended within the hour. Two major fashion brands that sponsored her influencer content issued public statements on their pages, severing all ties immediately and citing a zero-tolerance policy for fraudulent behavior. Her carefully curated career, built entirely on the illusion of a perfect marriage and unearned wealth, evaporated into thin air. To make matters worse for Jamal, his carefully constructed alpha male persona was annihilated. The Miami sugar baby, realizing her benefactor was actually broke and committing felony credit card fraud, immediately took to her own social media. She posted screenshots of Jamal begging her to lay low, completely outing him as a penniless grifter living in his mother-in-law's basement. Brittany tried desperately to delete the negative comments, but they were pouring in by the thousands. Eventually, she panicked and locked her entire account, switching it to private and disappearing from the internet entirely. Meanwhile, the country club explosion was happening entirely offline, but the shockwaves reached me just the same. My desk phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, but the transcript popped up on my screen shortly after. It was Eleanor. Her voice was shaking with pure, unadulterated fury. She was not calling to yell at me. She was calling to thank me for opening her eyes. She informed my voicemail that Patricia had just been formally expelled from the club's planning committee and was permanently banned from the premises. Her lifelong friends had created a unified front, cutting her off completely. The aunts and uncles who had previously accused me of being heartless were suddenly faced with the photographic reality of child neglect. The image of the freezing concrete floor where I spent my winters while Brittany slept on a plush mattress shattered their illusion of Patricia as a devoted mother. The relatives who had cursed my name just an hour ago were now turning their rage directly onto Patricia. They flooded the family group chat, demanding explanations for the sleeping bag, the stolen money, and the vile insults. My mother's phone was undoubtedly melting down as her sister's cousins and supposedly inferior relatives unleashed years of pent-up resentment after reading exactly what she thought of them. She was entirely exiled, stripped of her fake prestige, and left with nothing but the ugly truth of her own making. I took another sip of my tea, feeling the warm liquid soothe my throat. The storm was raging wildly outside my office windows, tearing their lives down to the studs. They had demanded a public spectacle, and I had simply given the audience the script. The digital fallout was instantaneous, but the physical blowback took exactly 48 hours to arrive at my doorstep. Or rather, it arrived at the pristine marble floors of my corporate headquarters. I was in the middle of a quarterly strategy review when Clara's voice crackled through the intercom. She sounded breathless, her usual professional composure completely fractured. "Alyssa," she said, her voice tight with panic. "Your mother and Jamal are in the main lobby. They pushed past the security turnstiles and are causing a massive disturbance. They are demanding to see you immediately." I did not rush. I calmly closed my laptop, excused myself from the meeting, and returned to my office. I picked up my cell phone and dialed a specific number I had kept on speed dial for the past 3 days. I spoke for less than 30 seconds, confirming the timing. Then I adjusted my tailored blazer and headed for the private glass elevator. The main lobby of Global Partnerships was designed to project absolute corporate tranquility. It was a cavernous expanse of white stone floor-to-ceiling windows and hushed professional efficiency. Today it sounded like a dive bar brawl. As the elevator doors slid open, the sheer volume of Jamal's screaming echoed off the marble walls. He was red-faced, a thick vein pulsing furiously in his neck, leaning aggressively over the main reception desk. Patricia stood right behind him, waving her hands frantically, playing the role of the outraged, victimized matriarch to absolute perfection. She was clutching her designer handbag like a shield, screeching at the terrified receptionist about lawsuits, defamation, and destroyed reputations. "I want her down here right now," Jamal roared, slamming his heavy fist against the reception desk. "She is a liar. She planted those fake bank statements to ruin my life, and I'm going to sue this entire company into the ground. Call her down here before I go up there and drag her out myself." I stepped out of the elevator. I was not alone. Flanking me were two of our largest corporate security directors, both men standing over 6 feet tall with expressions of stone. Walking slightly behind them, dressed in a sharp gray suit, was Detective Rollins. He was a senior investigator with the Financial Crimes Division, and we had become very well acquainted over the past few weeks. I walked directly toward the chaotic duo, the sharp click of my heels echoing through the sudden silence of the lobby as the staff noticed my arrival. "You have exactly 1 minute to state your business before you are forcibly removed for trespassing," I said. My voice was perfectly level, slicing through the tension like a razor. Jamal whipped around, his eyes blazing with a toxic mixture of humiliation and unhinged rage. "You set me up," he snarled, taking a heavy, intimidating step forward. "You fabricated those receipts. You hired someone to hack my accounts. You ruined my marriage and my reputation. I want a public retraction right now, and I want compensation for the damages you caused my brand." Patricia pushed her way forward, her face twisted in an ugly snarl. "You wicked, vindictive girl," she hissed. "Brittany is practically catatonic in bed. Your father's country club friends are treating us like lepers. You will write Jamal a check for his pain and suffering, and you will take down that disgusting website today, or I swear I will ruin you." I did not flinch. I did not step back. I looked at Jamal's sweating, desperate face, and then at my mother's delusional, frantic eyes. I felt a profound sense of pity for how small they truly were. Everything I posted was the absolute verified truth. I stated, my voice echoing clearly for the entire lobby to hear. "You spent $50,000 of my stolen corporate funds on a 22-year-old college student in Miami. You lost my father's entire pension in fraudulent offshore crypto schemes. I did not ruin your life, Jamal. I just turned on the lights." Jamal lost whatever tiny shred of sanity he was clinging to. "I am going to destroy you," he roared, lunging forward with his massive hands balled into fists. He did not make it 2 steps. Detective Rollins stepped smoothly around me, stepping directly into Jamal's path while flashing a gold badge. The 2 security guards instantly flanked him, creating an impenetrable wall. Jamal froze in his tracks. The arrogant, aggressive swagger evaporated in a fraction of a second, instantly replaced by the sheer, paralyzing terror of a cornered animal. "Jamal Davis." Detective Rollins said, his voice deep and commanding, ringing out in the dead-silent lobby. "You are under arrest." "What?" Jamal stammered, stepping backward, his hands flying up in a defensive gesture. No, you have it wrong." She is the one harassing me. She is lying. You are under arrest for multiple counts of wire fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Rollins continued pulling a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt. We received a very comprehensive, fully documented file from the FBI's cyber division yesterday morning. It seems the offshore accounts you used to funnel stolen retirement funds flagged several federal violations. Put your hands behind your back. Patricia shrieked. It was a high, piercing sound of absolute horror. This is a mistake, she cried out, grabbing Jamal's arm as if she could physically pull him away from the law. My son-in-law is a legitimate investor. He is a wealthy man. Alyssa is making this all up to hurt us. Ma'am, step back immediately or you will be charged with interfering with an arrest, Rollins warned sharply. One of the security guards stepped forward gently but firmly, separating my hysterical mother from Jamal. Jamal was spun around and shoved firmly against the cold marble wall. The sharp metallic click of the handcuffs locking around his wrists echoed through the lobby. He did not fight back. He completely collapsed into himself, his knees buckling slightly as the reality of his future finally crushed him. I stood perfectly still, resting my hands in the pockets of my trousers. I watched the color drain entirely from Jamal's face as the detective read him his rights. I watched Patricia sink against the reception desk, weeping hysterically, as her final desperate shield of delusion was violently stripped away. They had come to my sanctuary expecting to intimidate me into submission. Instead, they had walked directly into the trap I had meticulously laid for them. The game was officially over. The shock of the cold steel locking around his wrists snapped Jamal out of his temporary paralysis. The reality of his situation finally breached his thick skull, and his survival instincts kicked in. Unfortunately for him, his only survival instinct was manipulation. He violently twisted his shoulders, attempting to wrench himself away from Detective Rollins and the towering security guards. His chest heaved as he projected his voice across the expansive, echoing marble lobby, ensuring every single employee and bystander could hear him. "This is a targeted setup," Jamal roared, his face contorted in a mask of righteous indignation. "You are all witnessing a blatant hate crime. You are targeting a highly successful black man because this corrupt corporate system cannot handle it. She fabricated these federal charges because she is a racist. She cannot stand seeing a black man out earning her and building generational wealth, so she called the police to lynch my career." The lobby fell into an absolute breathless hush. Several employees stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide with shock at the severity of the accusation. Jamal scanned the room desperately, trying to rally the onlookers to his side, playing the ultimate victim card to weaponize the public space against me. I did not flinch. I did not let his manipulative outburst hang in the air for more than a single second. I stepped forward, my heels clicking sharply against the stone floor, closing the distance until I stood precisely 2 feet away from his sweating, desperate face. I looked him dead in the eyes, my expression a mask of absolute glacial indifference. "You stole from single mothers," I stated, my voice slicing through the silence like a scalpel projecting clearly to every corner of the room. "You conned your own father-in-law out of his entire life savings and pension. And you used my corporate credit cards to buy Hermes bags for a 22-year-old college student in Miami. No victim card is going to save you from federal prison, Jamal." The sheer factual weight of my words stripped the oxygen right out of his lungs. Jamal's mouth opened and closed silently, the self-righteous fury instantly replaced by cornered panic. He had nothing left to say. But the true impact of my statement did not land on Jamal. It landed on the woman standing frantically just a few feet away. "What did you just say?" Patricia whispered. Her voice was brittle, devoid of its usual booming authority. She pushed past one of the security guards, completely ignoring Jamal now, and locked her horrified, wide eyes onto my face. The designer handbag she had been clutching like a weapon slipped from her grasp, hitting the floor with a dull thud. "The pension," Patricia demanded, her hands trembling violently. "What do you mean he conned the pension? Thomas's retirement is secured in a conservative municipal bond fund. Thomas handles all of our long-term accounts." I turned my attention entirely to my mother. For 32 years, this woman had systematically broken me down, mocked my ambitions, and elevated a con artist above her own flesh and blood, because he bought her expensive champagne and flattered her ego. Now she was going to hear the exact price of her delusions. Thomas gave Jamal full, unrestricted control of your entire retirement portfolio. 8 months ago, I explained delivering the devastating truth with brutal clinical precision. Jamal promised him a guaranteed 30% quarterly return. Instead of investing it, Jamal wired every single penny of your life savings into a fraudulent offshore cryptocurrency shell company to cover the massive losses he incurred trying to fund your luxury lifestyle. The money is gone, Mom. It has been gone for months. You are completely bankrupt. Patricia's face drained of all color, leaving her skin an ashen, sickly gray. She slowly turned her head, fixing her gaze on the man currently wearing federal handcuffs. The golden son-in-law she had paraded around the country club, the man she had used to constantly humiliate and diminish me, was shrinking under her stare. "Tell me she is lying." Patricia shrieked, her voice cracking into a guttural, desperate wail. "Jamal, look at me. Tell me you did not touch our money." Jamal refused to make eye contact. He stared fixedly at the marble floor, his shoulders hunched defensively. It was just a temporary dip in the market liquidity. He mumbled, his voice weak and pathetic. "I was going to cycle it back before the annual tax reporting. It was a secure bet." Patricia unleashed a sound I had never heard before. It was a primal, furious scream that echoed off the high glass ceilings. She lunged forward, her manicured hands extended like claws aiming directly for Jamal's face. "You stole my life," she screamed, completely abandoning her refined country club persona. "You thief! You ruined me!" The security guards moved instantly, catching Patricia by the arms and dragging her backward as she kicked and thrashed, sobbing uncontrollably. Right at that moment of absolute chaos, the heavy revolving glass doors at the front of the lobby spun violently. Brittany stumbled into the building. She was breathless, her hair plastered to her sweaty forehead, wearing the same oversized gray sweatshirt from her manipulative online video. She had clearly sprinted from whatever cheap rideshare had brought her here, since the bank had officially repossessed her luxury SUV that morning. Brittany took in the catastrophic scene. Her husband was restrained in steel cuffs by a federal detective. Her mother was being physically held back by corporate security, sobbing about bankruptcy. And I was standing perfectly untouched in the center of the wreckage, holding absolute control over the room. "No," Brittany gasped, sprinting across the marble floor. "No, Jamal." She threw herself toward Detective Rollins, but one of my security directors swiftly stepped into her path, blocking her advance. Brittany spun around, locking her desperate, tear-filled eyes on me. All of her arrogant golden child entitlement, the smug superiority she had worn like a crown her entire life, had completely evaporated. She was broken. "Alyssa, please!" Brittany begged, collapsing to her knees right there on the cold stone floor. Her voice dissolved into pathetic, gasping sobs. "I am begging you, you cannot do this. Drop the charges. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. If he goes to prison, my life is completely over. I have no money. I have no car. The bank is taking my house. I have absolutely nowhere to go. Please, Alyssa, I am your sister." I looked down at her. I searched the deepest corners of my heart for even a fraction of an ounce of sympathy, a shred of familial obligation. There was absolutely nothing there but the cold, clinical satisfaction of justice. "I am not pressing the charges, Brittany," I stated smoothly, my voice devoid of any emotion. "The federal government is pressing the charges. I simply provided the documentation they required. Your husband built a life entirely on fraud, and you gladly spent the stolen money to fund your fake influencer fantasies while treating me like trash. You wanted a luxury lifestyle without putting in the hard work. Now you are going to have to face the real world." Detective Rollins firmly gripped Jamal by the bicep. "Let us go," Rollins ordered, marching the disgraced con artist toward the main exit. Jamal shouted empty, desperate threats over his shoulder, but nobody cared to listen. Patricia slumped against the reception desk, weeping hysterically about her ruined reputation and her empty bank accounts. Brittany remained on her knees, burying her face in her hands, wailing my name in a high, piercing tone. I turned my back on the entire pathetic spectacle. I walked calmly toward the private glass elevator and pressed the call button. The doors slid open smoothly. I stepped inside, turned around, and looked directly at the head of my security detail. Security. I ordered, my voice echoing one final time across the marble lobby. Escort all unauthorized personnel out of the building immediately. The heavy glass doors slid shut, sealing me in absolute perfect silence. Exactly 1 month after those elevator doors sealed me in my peaceful sanctuary, the final pillar of my parents' carefully constructed empire collapsed. I had received the official notification from my legal team shortly after my morning espresso. The bank had officially foreclosed on the Wilson estate. Without my silent monthly electronic transfers covering their exorbitant mortgage, their financial ruin had accelerated at a breathtaking pace. The bank had given them ample grace periods, but without my corporate salary keeping their lavish lifestyle afloat, the eviction was absolute and unavoidable. It was not a dignified exit. It was a chaotic, humiliating scramble. According to the private investigator my lawyer had kept on retainer to monitor the fallout, Patricia and Thomas were physically escorted off the property by local sheriffs. They had dragged their feet until the absolute final hour, utterly paralyzed by their own denial. They genuinely believed that somehow a miracle would save them. They believed their social status made them immune to the severe consequences of extreme debt. The reality check arrived in the form of marked police cruisers and a team of professional eviction movers. Patricia stood on the curb of the manicured lawn she used to brag about, surrounded by hastily packed cardboard boxes and black plastic garbage bags stuffed with her designer clothes. The bank had already seized her luxury sedan. She was stranded on the sidewalk of her elite neighborhood, entirely exposed. That was when Eleanor's silver Mercedes glided slowly down the street. The car slowed to a crawl. The tinted passenger window rolled down smoothly. Susan was sitting in the passenger seat, holding up her smartphone, actively recording the entire pathetic spectacle. They did not shout insults. They did not need to hurl any verbal abuse. Eleanor simply stared at Patricia, a sharp, vindictive smirk playing on her lips, while Susan captured the ultimate destruction of Patricia's social facade. They pointed, laughed softly, and drove away, broadcasting Patricia's ultimate ruin to the entire country club group chat. Her social execution was complete, irreversible, and thoroughly documented. Sitting amidst the physical wreckage of their lives, Patricia turned to her family for support. Instead, she found a mirror reflecting her own terrible parenting. Brittany was not helping. She was sitting on a trash bag full of shoes, weeping hysterically because she had chipped a manicured nail while trying to carry a heavy makeup case. With Jamal sitting in a federal detention center awaiting trial for wire fraud, Brittany had been forced to crawl back to our parents. She offered absolutely no solutions, no comfort, and zero survival skills. She just demanded that Patricia fix the situation. She demanded to know why they could not simply rent a luxury condo downtown. She whined about the heat, the physical labor of moving, and her permanently ruined social media career. Patricia looked at her golden child, the daughter she had worshipped and elevated above me her entire life, and finally realized she had raised a helpless, entitled parasite who viewed her parents only as an endless ATM. Thomas was no better. My father sat on a taped-up moving box, staring blankly at the empty driveway. He was a completely broken man. The pension he had worked his entire life to build was gone, vanished into the ether of Jamal's offshore crypto scams. He had allowed his wife's vanity and his own passivity to blind him to the truth. He had enabled the abuse of his eldest daughter to keep the peace in his household. Now entering his senior years, he had literally nothing to his name. He lacked the energy to even comfort his crying wife. By nightfall, they had relocated to the only place that would accept tenants with obliterated credit scores, massive debt, and zero proof of income. It was a cramped, dingy two-bedroom apartment in a rundown complex on the industrial outskirts of the city. The contrast was devastating. The thin walls were stained with years of nicotine smoke. The cheap linoleum floors were peeling at the corners, and the harsh, flickering fluorescent lighting illuminated every grim reality of their new existence. There was no space for Brittany's overflowing wardrobe. There was no mahogany study for Thomas to retreat into. There were no marble countertops for Patricia to lean against while sipping imported wine. They were forced to step over each other in the narrow, suffocating hallway. The intense proximity forced them to finally confront the toxic, boiling resentment they had been hiding behind closed doors for decades. The absolute breaking point arrived 2 days later. The electricity in their new apartment flickered and died. Patricia had failed to pay the basic activation deposit for the utility company, completely unaccustomed to managing actual bills. Sitting in the sweltering, pitch-black apartment, listening to Brittany sob uncontrollably in the next room while Thomas sat silently in the shadows, Patricia finally broke. She pulled out her cell phone. The battery was at 10%. She opened her contacts and stared at my name. For 32 years, she had viewed me with absolute contempt. She'd called me a cold, calculating sociopath. She had actively tried to ruin my career and my life. But starvation, darkness, and complete social annihilation have a unique way of crushing a narcissist's pride. I was sitting at my pristine glass dining table reviewing a highly profitable new partnership contract over a glass of sparkling water when my personal phone began to vibrate. I glanced at the glowing screen. Mother. I let it ring 4 times, letting the anticipation build before sliding my finger across the glass to accept the call. I did not say hello. I simply breathed into the receiver, waiting in perfect silence. Alyssa Patricia's voice crackled through the speaker. It was a sound I had never heard in my entire life. It was small, fragile, and trembling. It was completely stripped of its usual venomous authority, reduced to a pathetic whisper. Please do not hang up. I remained perfectly silent, letting the agonizing dead air stretch between us, allowing her to feel the immense weight of her desperation. We have nothing, Alyssa. She choked out a raw, humiliating sob, breaking her sentence. The house is gone. Thomas is barely speaking to me. Brittany just cries all day and refuses to look for a job. We are in the dark. We have no food. I know you hate us. I know you have every right to despise me after everything I did. But I am begging you. I am a mother begging her own daughter. Please just send a few $100, just enough to get the lights turned on, just enough to survive the week. I will do anything you want. I listened to the sound of my mother weeping through the phone speaker. For a fleeting second, the ghost of the desperate little girl who used to sleep in a freezing basement twitched in my chest. But that girl was dead. I had buried her years ago. I will meet you tomorrow at 10 in the morning, I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion. The corner diner on 4th Street, do not be late. I ended the call before she could utter another word or launch into another hysterical plea. I did not choose the location by accident. The corner diner was a run-of-the-mill greasy spoon establishment with sticky linoleum floors, cracked vinyl booths, and the permanent smell of fried bacon hanging in the air. It was exactly the kind of establishment the old Patricia would have called a biological hazard. It was the perfect place for our final conversation. I arrived 10 minutes early. I wore a perfectly tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back in a sharp, immaculate bun. I ordered a black coffee and sat in a corner booth watching the entrance. Patricia walked in 15 minutes late. The sight of her was genuinely startling. The immaculate country club matriarch who had terrorized my youth was completely gone. Her expensive blonde hair dye was fading, revealing stark gray roots. Without her routine chemical peels and expensive salon treatments, her skin looked papery and deeply lined with stress. She wore a faded beige cardigan over a wrinkled blouse that hung loosely on her frame. The sheer reality of poverty had aged her a decade in a single month. She looked exactly like what she was, a broke, desperate woman who had run out of options. She spotted me and hurried over, sliding into the booth across from me. Her hands were shaking violently as she gripped the edge of the table. Alyssa, she breathed out, her eyes darting around the diner nervously. She reached across the table, attempting to grab my hand. I pulled my hand back smoothly, resting it out of her reach in my lap. Speak, I instructed. She swallowed hard and launched into a tearful, frantic monologue. She told me she was sorry. She said the words over and over, but the apology was entirely hollow, wrapped in layers of deflection and excuses. She claimed Jamal was a master manipulator who had hypnotized them all. She blamed Thomas for being negligent with the retirement accounts and failing to protect their assets. She blamed the economy. She even subtly tried to blame me for not warning them about Jamal's financial history sooner. I was under so much pressure to maintain our family image. Patricia pleaded, dabbing at her eyes with a crumpled tissue. You have to understand the stress I was under, Alyssa. I made mistakes with you, I know that now. But we are blood. You cannot leave your own mother in a place like that. There are cockroaches in the hallway. The water is brown. Thomas just stares at the wall all day, and Brittany refuses to get out of bed. She does not know how to cope with this. You are the strong one. You have always been the strong one. We need you. I watched her carefully. I was actively searching her face for a single shred of genuine maternal warmth, a single ounce of real remorse for the childhood she had stolen from me. There was nothing. She was not crying because she regretted abusing me. She was crying because she was finally experiencing the harsh, unfiltered consequences of her own actions, and she wanted me to shield her from them. I just need a small bridge loan, Patricia whispered, leaning forward with hungry, desperate eyes. 5,000 a month. Barely a fraction of your corporate income. Just enough to get us into a decent apartment in a safe neighborhood and get Brittany back on her feet. You have so much money now. You will not even notice it is gone. Please, Alyssa. I reached into my leather briefcase. I pulled out a crisp white envelope and slid it across the sticky table. Patricia's eyes lit up with ravenous relief. A breathless, pathetic laugh escaped her lips as she snatched the envelope. She tore it open with shaking fingers, expecting to find a certified check or a prepaid debit card. She pulled out the stack of papers. Her face fell. The frantic relief morphed instantly into profound confusion and then into outrage. These are not checks, she stammered, staring at the printed pamphlets. No, I replied calmly, taking a slow sip of my coffee. They are contact sheets for the State Department of Senior Employment Services. There is also an application for subsidized low-income housing assistance and a comprehensive schedule for the local food banks in your district. I also highlighted a job fair specifically designed for seniors looking to re-enter the workforce. It takes place next Tuesday. Patricia stared at me as if I had just plunged a knife into her chest. Her hands trembled so hard the papers rattled against the table. You want me to work? She hissed, her voice rising in pitch. I am 62 years old. I have not worked a single day in my life. You want me to serve food or answer phones for minimum wage? I am your mother. You have millions of dollars. You owe me. I leaned forward, resting my forearms on the table, locking my eyes onto hers. You are going to have to learn how to survive in the real world, Patricia, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet register that commanded absolute authority. It is time you figure out how to live your own life and provide for yourself exactly the way you expected me to do when you locked me in a damp basement and told me to sleep on the freezing concrete floor. She opened her mouth to scream, to hurl the vile, familiar insults she had used to keep me in line my entire life. But the words died in her throat. She looked into my eyes and saw the sheer glacial finality staring back at her. She realized in that exact moment that she possessed absolutely zero leverage. I had no guilt left for her to manipulate. I had no craving for her love left for her to exploit. The well was completely dry. I stood up, smoothing the front of my blazer. I pulled a $20 bill from my pocket and placed it on the table to cover my coffee. I turned and walked toward the exit. I did not look back. I did not hesitate. As the bell above the diner door chimed, I stepped out into the crisp, bright morning air. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs completely, and realized something profoundly beautiful. I did not hate her anymore. Hatred required energy. Hatred required attachment and passion. All I felt was a vast, peaceful emptiness. The ledger was finally balanced. The debts were settled. I walked to my car, slid behind the wheel, and drove back toward the empire I had built with my own two hands, leaving the ghosts of my past exactly where they belonged. 6 months later, the ghosts of my past were permanently silenced. They were replaced by the crisp, biting wind of the Colorado mountains. I stood on the wraparound mahogany balcony of the presidential villa at the most exclusive resort in Aspen. This was the exact same resort Patricia used to casually name drop at her country club luncheons, always booking the cheapest standard rooms while pretending to her friends that they were staying in the penthouses. Today, I was occupying the top floor entirely on my own terms, paid for by the corporate empire I had built from the ground up. Inside the suite, the massive stone fireplace crackled warmly, casting a soft golden glow across the vaulted timber ceilings and the sweeping floor-to-ceiling windows. My daughter Mia sat comfortably on a thick plush rug. She was happily roasting gourmet marshmallows over a small, safe tabletop fire pit that our private butler Henri had arranged specifically for her enjoyment. Her joyous, carefree laughter echoed through the massive suite. It was a pure, innocent sound entirely unburdened by the toxic expectations I had grown up with. Watching her, a profound, overwhelming sense of victory washed over me. I had successfully broken the generational curse. Mia would never know the cold, conditional love that had defined my entire childhood. She would never be measured against a golden child, and she would never be forced to earn her right to exist in her own home. She was cherished simply because she was mine. She was served like a tiny queen, and we were enjoying a life of absolute peace. I stepped back inside the warm suite and closed the heavy glass door against the winter chill. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my rich, dark hot chocolate, letting the deep warmth spread through my chest as I looked back out at the jagged, snow-capped peaks. A lot had changed in half a year. The silence on my personal cell phone was the most beautiful sound in the world. There were no more frantic, demanding text messages. There were no more manipulative voicemails begging for emergency wire transfers. The financial parasites had been completely severed from their host. Jamal was currently serving a lengthy sentence in a federal penitentiary for his wire fraud and embezzlement schemes. Brittany, permanently stripped of her stolen luxury and fake influencer status, was now working double shifts at a local retail store, learning the brutal, exhausting reality of minimum wage labor. And Patricia, the woman who had demanded $5,000 a month just to maintain her delusions of grandeur, was now clocking in daily as a greeter at a big-box hardware store. Thomas remained in that dingy apartment, finally forced to live within the absolute limits of his own passivity. I did not feel an ounce of pity for any of them. I felt absolutely nothing. The space in my heart that used to hold guilt and obligation was now filled with serene, unshakable confidence. Society heavily conditions us to believe that family is a sacred, unbreakable bond. We are constantly taught that blood ties require endless forgiveness, infinite patience, and unconditional financial support, regardless of the abuse we are forced to suffer. We are told to keep the peace, to turn the other cheek, and to honor our parents no matter how deeply they destroy our mental health. But staring out at the pristine, untouched white snow of the mountains, I knew the absolute truth. Family does not mean sharing a bloodline with people who act like emotional and financial vampires. Family is not a group of people who drain your resources and your sanity while secretly hoping for your downfall so they can feel better about their own failures. Real family consists of the people who protect you. Real family uplifts you, cherishes your ambitions, and celebrates your success without a single trace of toxic envy. I had transformed myself from the discarded, overlooked scapegoat into the absolute architect of my own destiny. I was no longer the girl sleeping on a cold basement floor. I was a woman holding the keys to the presidential villa. The empire I built was finally untouchable, because its foundation was no longer compromised by misplaced loyalty. I had taken back my life, my finances, and my dignity. Protecting yourself from toxic people is never an act of selfishness. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. You do not owe your abusers a comfortable life simply because they share your last name or your DNA. Sometimes the sweetest, most devastating revenge is not a grand screaming confrontation in a crowded room. It is not about filing lawsuits or destroying their property. The sweetest revenge is simply cutting off the supply. It is about walking away, locking the door behind you, and leaving them to face the brutal, unfiltered reality of their own incompetence. Have you ever had to draw a hard line and cut toxic family members out of your life? How did it feel to finally choose your own peace of mind over their endless demands? Share your story in the comments below. If my journey from betrayal to absolute freedom resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more stories about surviving toxic families and taking back your power. Thank you for listening, and always remember your peace is your most valuable asset. Never let anyone convince you to sell it at a discount. The most profound lesson learned from this story is that sharing a bloodline does not obligate you to endure endless toxicity or financial exploitation. True family is defined by unconditional support, mutual respect, and genuine care, not by manipulation or entitlement. Protecting your mental health and personal success from destructive relatives is never an act of selfishness. It is the ultimate form of pure survival. Walking away from abuse allows you to reclaim your narrative and completely build a life of authentic peace. Please share your own experiences of setting boundaries with toxic relatives to protect your peace. Comment below.